as George R. Martin himself said, the show and the books are separate canon. One is not the other. However, that said, one is clearly based off of the other. House of the Dragon is adapted from Fire and Blood, but Fire and Blood is unlike the overwhelming majority of book-to-show adaptations. I think a lot of us, probably most of us listening to the show, prefer the show to change as little as possible from the books. We might all differ on what as little as possible means, but that opinion aside, Fire and Blood requires the addition of substantial portions of the story. A Song of Ice and Fire did not. Well, it did require portions to be added at the end. Substantial portions, all of it, really, besides the bits George had told them. But on HBO's Game of Thrones, the showrunners didn't have to create personalities. They had to do very little dialogue creation, again, after the point where the books finish or are left off. George did all that already. But with few exceptions, that's not the case with Fire and Blood, right? There's not huge amounts of dialogue, huge amounts of characterization. There are missing events, things that you would clearly expect to be there, but aren't written about. Conversations, dreams, relationships, things like that just don't make a history book. So there is a lot more implied creation for this adaptation than there is for A Song of Ice and Fire. A Song of Ice and Fire, they had too much. They couldn't possibly do it all. Here, well, there's not enough in a lot of places, and they must make up for that. An example of that is one I've thrown out a few times throughout the season, Daemon's arc in the Riverlands. It can be measured in sentences. You could count the number of sentences in Fire and Blood. It wouldn't take you very long. It's not even a matter of paragraphs. Rhaenyra's grief-based inaction in the book spans a lot longer than the show does even. She's actually sidelined for longer, so they changed that a bit. And from Eric versus Arik to the Book of Rook's Rest is under 450 words. To put that in perspective, 450 words is roughly 4 to 5 minutes of an audiobook. And the average audiobook chapter for A Song of Ice and Fire is probably close to 30 minutes. So, which would, by, a little simple math, be something like 3,000 words or a lot more, yeah, or 30,000, yeah, just massively more, way more than, wait, is that right? 3,000, way more, and so it's a huge difference. So in this episode, I'm going to be more critical of the choices they made. It gets tiresome for me to talk about that every episode throughout the season, so we do it all at once here at the end. And just because I agree that changes are needed doesn't mean I agree with the specific changes they made. But in going through these, we're also going to highlight some really good choices they made. Because, well, if I'm not critical of it, then I at least think it's okay. But I want to highlight the things they did well also. So it's not a bash fest. It's a criticism and praise fest. And uncovering all the details you might have missed. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody. We are back with not quite the end of our House of the Dragon Season 2 coverage, but this is an important milestone in the wrap-up of that coverage. As you can see, we don't have a guest or a Sean today, running solo with Tashaya's help, of course. She'll chime in on a few of these topics, but mostly it'll be me chatting away. You all can weigh in with your takes. With so many book-to-show interpretations possible, it's very likely I missed some things, so feel free to drop your comments in the chat here if you're watching live, or send them to us at westeroshistory@gmail.com, or you can tweet it at us, or send us messages on Patreon if you are a patron. And by the way, if you are a patron, it means you can listen to these episodes without ads. And we all could use a few more minutes in the day. If you listen to your podcast without ads, well, that's where you get a few more minutes. No skipping around, just right through it. Yeah, we've got all that set up for you. So join us at patreon.com/history of Westeros and make your listening a little more efficient. Now, before we get started, For My People sends a super chat, says, love you guys and your collaborative works with In Deep Geek as well. Some of the best and most consistent A Song of Ice and Fire creators in the game. Hey, appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words. Yeah, we love working with Robert as well. He's great.
Hey, Aziz, why don't you tell people what some of the episodes are that you've written for him recently?
That's a good question. Yeah, I often don't point out that I write episodes for Robert pretty regularly. This season, I wrote a Dragon Seeds episode, a Pact of Ice and Fire episode, a Blood and Cheese episode, a Battle of Rook's Rest episode, a Vermithor episode, and I might be forgetting one, but quite a few. He usually mentions that, or I think he always mentions that it was a collab at the beginning of the video, but y'all might not know that if you haven't watched them. So yeah, In Deep Geek YouTube channel, we do work together quite a bit, and that has been going on for a couple of years, and it's going to continue. We've formed a solid partnership there. Okay, let's get right into it. We've got a lot of things to cover here. It's one of the reasons it would have been good to have a guest for a topic like this, but also because there's so much to cover, I decided to do this one solo.
It would be so long.
It would be so long, yeah. If you all remember, a lot of you guys have been listeners for a long time, and you're familiar with our coverage with Radio Westeros. We would do a book to show episode every single week during Game of Thrones season. As I said here in the intro, it's not quite as necessary here. It's implied that so much more is going to be made up. There's fewer changes per se, more additions and less changes. Whereas, yeah. Anyway, you all know. We've been through this. The North, let's start with the North, where the season began. The bit of choosing people for the wall with the Blackstone and all that. That's new, of course. That's not in the book. It's fitting. I kind of like the idea. And it's because the Night's Watch did start to struggle after Aegon's conquest, because there weren't wars all around the continent, which that's a good thing. But the downside was no more losers getting sent to the wall because, well, there's no more wars for the most part. So it was well done. I give them praise for creating something that makes sense within the context of the books. That you have to know that this was an issue in the books to create this solution for it. So I think that requires some attention to detail reading between the lines, because it's not just flat out said that Aegon's conquest sank the Night's Watch. It's implied, but not said. So I like that they noticed that. They sort of implied or straight out said that Aegon bent the knee, or rather, Aegon bent the knee, that Torrhen bent the knee to Aegon. Aegon never bent the knee to anyone at the wall, which is very different than him bending the knee near Harrenhal in sight of the burning towers, where he would have been a lot more intimidated. So maybe there's been a change there, or maybe Jace was just misremembering how it went and Cregan didn't correct him, or maybe he doesn't know either. Not a big change though either way. Where Aegon or where Torrhen knelt, it's not a big deal, I don't think. I think it makes more sense to have him march south and see Harrenhal burning and be like, then see the dragons and be like, never mind. But the big deal is seeing the dragons. If the dragons came north and he saw them there and was like, okay, all right, yeah, we can't beat that. And if we do, it means we can't fight winter. So damned if we do, damned if we don't. So I get it. It fits either way. They added to the idea of Silverwing not passing the wall, which is from the book, from Fire and Blood. They said that Vermithor also would not pass the wall. So that's interesting. It does create a little bit of a conundrum because, well, that fits the books nicely, but in the show, Dany's dragons didn't have any trouble passing the wall, so I don't really know what that's all about.
They knew how important it was.
They knew how important it was. Yeah, the time had come. That's like, no, it's not time yet. We're not going beyond the wall unless there's a reason to. Right now, it's just
not
cold.
For sightseeing.
Yeah,
Alysanne
not for sightseeing.
Wanted to sightsee? No, we're not crossing for that.
Yeah, if the others are there, sure. All right, fine. That's fair, yeah. Anyway, so I prefer, and that does, it's a conundrum for House of the Dragon to deal with something the show changed that they didn't have to. Do we stick with the show change or do we find a way to keep it to the books? Obviously, we want them to keep it to the books, but we also don't want things to not line up. We don't want, what's the word? I'm spacing on a very obvious word. Inconsistencies, yeah. So they're kind of stuck. It's going to be inconsistent either way. So they have to choose which inconsistency is lower impact. Jace and Cregan's relationship wasn't as tight as it was in the books. They went hunting together. They bonded over some things. Jace reminded Cregan of his younger brother who had passed, which could have been a thing for them to bond over when Jace finds out that Luke dies. But they're saving time. They didn't want to put time into this, which is a bummer. But we can't have all the time we want. No Sarah Snow, no Vermax's eggs. That was never a confirmed thing in the book. Anyway, that came from Mushroom. We said way in advance that we did not expect to see any of that. It would have been a big, fun surprise, but really unlikely. We also noted, prior to this season, the lack of mention of the Manderleys. Because in the book, Jace goes to the Vale and White Harbor and Winterfell. They left out White Harbor here. However, I can assume this is like the Daron effect. It's not an omission, it's a delaying. There's no reason to mention the Manderleys when they're not going to be included in the story until much later. Just like Daron. Daron, they could have started mentioning him in season 1, but they, and I would have preferred that. I think a lot of y'all would have preferred at least a mention or two, maybe just a line of dialogue to explain that he exists and why he's gone. But it's the same basic concept of they've decided not to introduce the character until it's relevant, more relevant in the chronology. So I think that it's still going to happen. Most likely, there's still going to be an agreement to betroth Joffrey to a Manderley daughter. It does just come later, right? It just doesn't matter. Like, the Manderleys don't participate in the Dance of the Dragons until Rhaenyra takes King's Landing. So why not push that off a little bit? I'm guessing that's it. That's probably the only reason they've changed it. I'm guessing the Manderleys will be cast for season 3. And if not, then we'll call that a big change. But a delay in mentioning them, that's a pretty small thing. That's the kind of change I'm okay with. Fewer men. I think there's been a change there. The Winter's Wolves, led by Roddy the Ruin, were 8,000 men. Cregan says 2,000 this time. That's probably not a huge change. They'll probably just take a huge number of casualties in the battle by the lakeshore. 3/4 of them die in that first battle. I think that's the difference right there. They'll probably just not take as many casualties in the battle by the lakeshore, the fish feed, and then still have 2,000 men, which is about where they would have been after that, taking that many casualties. Literally, it's the same number, right? What's 3/4 of 8,000? It's 6,000. So 6,000 minus 8,000 is 2,000. That's what they have now. So that's pretty small change, I guess. Assuming I'm right about what the plan is for that, which it might not be. But it seems pretty straightforward. Now, here's a weird part. I predicted that Cregan would lead the Winter's Wolves because law of conservation of characters. We've already met him. He's a good actor. They don't maybe want to leave him off screen for so long. And come to find out that they did film him at the head of that army that we saw in episode 8, marching across the Twins. And then they deleted him. So what's that about? Did they change their mind on revealing that he's leading the army? Or did they change their mind on him leading the army at all? I tend to think the first, because it would be a bigger change to just, actually, we're not going to have him lead the army. That seems like a larger change and a weird thing to change their mind on. Like, why would they change their mind on that?
It would suck for the actor. I'd be like, damn, was I that bad?
Right. He seemed quite good, I would say. And the other reason I predicted him is that who says the line, "We'll have no brave death for you, Kingmaker"? It's Longleaf the Lion Slayer. No, it's Roddy the Ruin who says that. Yeah.
Was that the quote?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
Was it no songs sung of you?
No songs, no brave songs sung about your death, Kingmaker.
Yeah, okay,
anyways, we'll have no song. Yeah,
I just like the song part.
That's Roddy the Ruin's line. So giving that to Cregan would make sense, And they could still have Roddy. He could still be like Cregan's second in command. They could have them both, because I still want that glorious charge where he loses his arm and kills the High Towers and all that. That's Roddy. Maybe they give that to Cregan instead, and Cregan just doesn't lose his arm and just survives that. But yeah, it's a big open question. So I'm going to guess that Cregan is leading that army, and they just decided not to show him. I don't know why, though. Why would they not show him leading the army? It's weird.
Yeah. It is true. I don't know why they would. I don't know why they would change that.
Yeah, maybe because they want it to be a surprise for us book readers, but just for us, just for book readers, because show watchers don't.
Show watchers are assuming he would lead the army.
They would probably assume that. You're right. Yeah. So it's.
I think if I asked any average show viewer, like, that Stark, do you expect him to come back in season 3 and be leading that army? They'd be like, of course.
Yeah, why wouldn't he be? They'd be surprised if he wasn't. So maybe it's a decision they haven't finalized yet. Maybe they're working on it. That's something they're totally debating internally right now. So we'll see about that. Daemon and Rhaenyra. Let's talk about them. Now, of course, there's some changes, quite a few changes here. These are the most central characters next to Alicent. And they do have a falling out in the book, but it comes much later and is never resolved, right? It involves Nettles, which is obviously different too, but we'll see about that. To be TBD how they handle Ray Nettles. We'll talk about that separately. I do like their clash overall, however, because Daemon was ambitious. And arguably the book version of him kind of falls in line under Rhaenyra's rule without much explanation. He's kind of doing his own thing, trying to maneuver and manipulate, and then he's married to Rhaenyra, and he seems to be content with that in the book version anyway. He doesn't try to steal her crown, or there's no they don't argue about things until she turns on Nettles later, and Daemon just goes to kill Aemond, and they never see each other again. So I kind of thought this is what they were setting up with this lack of trust with Harrenhal. So it's a bit of a change from my own prediction that Daemon falls in line after the prophecy and his dreams. So they're going to have a new falling out, and it could be over Ray Nettles or something else, or just Rhaenyra's escalating paranoia or god complex or something else. So they're handling that differently, but not dramatically differently. So I'm curious about that. And I like the changes here. I think having them argue, especially because it was so well done, the actual scene of their argument was great. It was disappointing that they didn't have more scenes together because they're so good together. And the main cast, the three main characters, since obviously Patty was the fourth main character last season, Viserys, they all spent more time with each other in season 1.
I'm so curious about whether we think they will actually romantically, reconcile with one another. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know if I have a read on whether I think that's in the cards for them at any point. Maybe they sleep together one time and they're like, no, that was a mistake. We're done.
That's a good question. I think they won't. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
I
kind of inclined they'll never be intimate again. But if they were intimate, I think it would be like one time and then they would have a falling out quickly or something. With Mysaria in the mix, with us knowing that Daemon's gonna leave, like Rhaenyra, he's not gonna be around her enough to really even be with her.
Yeah. I like the semi-foreshadowing, or maybe straight-up foreshadowing, of him wanting to go after Vhagar right away. Daemon, that is, of course. He wanted to get Rhaenys to help him with that, which was, we noted that was a parallel at the end of the season to Aemon trying to get Helena to go with him to go take out Caraxes. So it was pretty neat. And we got a little book line there. Daemon calls Vhagar that hoary old bitch, which is actually Jace's line in the book. And that's kind of funny.
I think that should be a t-shirt.
Yeah, Oriole Vhagar with Oriole bitch.
Yeah.
So another small difference for Daemon now is that he goes to Harrenhal right away in the book and directs events from there. They just do ravens go back and forth between Harrenhal and King's Land or Dragonstone, unlike in the show where Daemon just refuses to send ravens, even though they're sending ravens to him, and then eventually Alfred Broom. So he handles Blood and Cheese even from Harrenhal. And if you recall, Blood was fleeing the city with Jaehaerys' head to deliver it to Daemon for the reward. Presumably, it's not really said in the show that's what happened, but it's basically said, because he is caught with the head in a bag. There's no him going to Harrenhal because he wasn't at Harrenhal yet. But regardless, he was leaving with the head.
Yeah, so he would have just taken a boat to Dragonstone instead.
Yeah, and then been like, wait, Daemon already went to Harrenhal. Dang it. Now I have to go back. Because then they have their argument over Blood and Cheese, and that's when he leaves. So it would have been tricky for Blood to collect his reward regardless. So Blood and Cheese. There was some complaining about the scene. I don't really agree with the complaints that much. Not that I tell you're wrong to complain if you were one of those people to criticize the scene. I didn't really understand what the complaints were though, to be honest. Like I hear them, but I think they distill down to it wasn't gratuitous enough. Because honestly, the differences are pretty small. Yeah, Alice, again, in my opinion, there's definitely the fewer consequences on either side in the book. That's a change. Like it didn't matter that much. Like both sides didn't treat the others like kinslayers for it. Aemond is called kinslayer for killing Luke, but that's more explicit that he did that. Blood and Cheese is, yeah, they know the blacks did that, but no one pins it on a specific person. No one's like, Rhaenyra's the killer of Jaehaerys. That doesn't come up in the books. No one yells at her for that. No one accuses her of being a kinslayer, nor Daemon, even though he does it. So there's basically like, yeah, it's fine to murder young children when you're at war. That's kind of the attitude in the books. No one seems to see it as some monstrous act. Mysaria is far more willing to participate, but her participation is pretty similar. She's more like gleefully participating in the book almost. Maybe not gleeful, but she's all for it. Whereas she's just like, yeah, I don't really want to be involved in the book, but doesn't really have a chance because Daemon's like, well, your freedom depends on it. I'll let you go if you help me. So she needs to help in order to get her freedom, to get out of prison or what have you. So the explicit targeting isn't given in the book either. It does sound like it was Jaehaerys all along. We never actually hear Daemon's target. He just says a son for a son, which seems to make sense for Jaehaerys, but you could see how that might have been Aemond.
It makes more sense for them to target Aemond in retrospect. I think this... It just makes more sense, even though it's harder to kill him.
He's a military target. Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah.
But he's the rider of Vhagar. He's a more difficult target, regardless, though. So I see either argument, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm okay. In fact, I'm happy that they created this uncertainty because the book gives you that same uncertainty, and maybe the uncertainty device was used a lot. The misdirection or the accident device was used a lot this season.
A misunderstanding
device. It's been used a decent amount. I wouldn't say it was used too often. I'd say a lot of times this is realistic. A lot of times people's intentions are obscured when you're on opposite sides of a civil war.
Yeah, that I agree. I think that's a lot of conflicts in history and in just personal conflicts, not in the grand scheme of history, but just personal conflicts come down to a misunderstanding. Neither person was actually completely in the wrong, and they just didn't know what the other person intended. It's really that I think it is the ultimate tragedy in that people don't actually want to have this conflict.
Yeah, right on. So it was definitely Aemond in the show that there was a target, with these secondary instructions being obscured, but still there. Like, Rhaenyra brought it up. She's like, well, and what happens if they can't find Aemond? You surely gave instructions for that eventuality. And yeah, he did. It's just the camera cut away before we got that dialogue. So again, the killing isn't super different other than we don't see it, which I don't find the exclusion of Alicent to be a big deal because she's still included in the moment. She just isn't present for the killing. Her guilt is still there. Helena runs into her room, which sets up some other moments. Yeah, I didn't think it was that different in that sense. I think just the lack of gratuity. It wasn't as bloody. To me, that's really
maybe
the real
feels
big
more
difference.
Guilt in this scenario, in the show scenario.
More guilt, less trauma, perhaps. Yeah, like she didn't witness it, so she's not traumatized by seeing her grandchild's head cut off, but she's still very guilty over allowing it to happen and what she was doing during it. And Criston, like taking Criston away from his duties, etc. All these things. And Maelor's exclusion, too. I'm going to go against the grain on that one, too. Even George seems displeased by the exclusion of Maelor, but I really don't see it making a difference, y'all. Like, Maelor, his role is, yeah, he's a baby, so of course he doesn't do anything, but his existence doesn't do anything in the book either. It's a side quest that he dies on, right? One Kingsguard takes him away to safety, and it fails. He dies. Yes, it sets up Daeron's destruction of Bitterbridge over revenge. Surely there's another way to make that happen, for Daeron to destroy Bitterbridge for some other reason. Not a big difference, I don't think. They never in the book have a debate over who the heir is. Before or after Maelor's death, Aemond takes over and runs things. It just doesn't change anything. It's never a plot device in the book. So I don't see this. I just can't get behind calling this a big change. Earlier in the season, we talked about, maybe Maelor will be included later. Maybe Helena's already pregnant. That's still possible, but
seems very unlikely at this
unlikely
point.
Now.
Slim chance.
Fading to nearly nothing, yeah. And I'm like, well, what do we need Maelor for? I would, again, including him would be good because it sticks to the books. That's generally a good thing. But if they have to cut things, this to me makes a lot of sense. So sorry if you disagree.
It makes you wonder.
But hopefully you see my logic.
It makes me wonder, one, we know we have Rickard Thorne. What will his plot line lead to? What kind of, he might still take care of another member of the Targaryen family, of the Greens or something. He might be protector to Alicent, and she gets terribly, I don't know, that wouldn't make sense. But either way, I think that Daeron could still have a member of his family killed. theoretically, or
It
he
could be
just
Helena.
he could just have someone he cares about that is killed too. I don't know. Darren might have connections.
Yeah, maybe it's just there's plenty of reasons to go after Bitterbridge, or he could just be a jerk,
I mean, that's true.
I mean, Aemon burned Sharp Point just because he was mad, like that's not really the Daron we know, but the Daron we know burns Bitterbridge because of an accident, a misunderstanding in the book. Maelor's death was not the Black's fault.
Wait, I mean, you could just have. If
Bitterbridge's
Daron
fault.
had a little girlfriend and she died, he could
Sure.
do it for that. Like, I just mean, like, if you can think of 5 reasons how they could write Daron burning Bitterbridge, I stands to your point that Maelor is not essential.
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted him, but again, this shows that like if you're going to cut something, this is a solid choice. And the way it ends up is very similar too. And one way it ends up differently that I like. Okay, so here's what I mean by that. Helena in the book basically becomes a non-character after Blood and Cheese. And she wasn't a very big character in the book in the first place. So a lot of us, maybe even most of us, enjoy the changes to Helena from book to show here. So we would just delete all that if she becomes the traumatized version of her book version. Then she's just out of everything. And then she's just sitting there and mopey and sad and traumatized for good reason. But that's not as interesting. So this change is good because it keeps Helena as a character and more engaged in the plotline rather than sidelined. And so they just changed her from a person who liked to fly to too traumatized to fly after Blood and Cheese to a person that just never flew that much in the first place. That's not a big change. Either way, she's not a big dragon rider. Both book and show end up in the same place. So I don't have a big problem with that. I wanted to see more Dreamfire, but there's hardly any Dreamfire in the book.
I kind of like what you implied there when you brought up that Helena could be what spurs Daron to burn Bitterbridge, which is, I would love the possibility that it's Helena that escapes or is there or that we see her. I would like to see Helena out of King's Landing. I don't feel that her end has to really be the same.
It's been set up too, right? With Alicent talking about leaving, but
yeah,
I don't know if they're going to get the chance to leave. That sounds like they might get captured, but
yeah, I think she'll get there. But like the idea that maybe she would then still have a chance to leave after the fact. I mean, I still am rooting for Helena to get on her dragon and fly away.
There's the chance of anarchy, like the Moon of Three Kings. Helena could survive, escape King's Landing during that when Rhaenyra flees, and then she escapes later. I don't know why she would be separated from her daughter, but there's plenty of ways to make that happen.
Yeah, in terms of if we're talking about the fact that they're making changes, I think it's fine to have some wishful thinking and think about the changes I would love for them to make. And yeah, things that give Helena more to do that's what I want out of changes, I guess.
Yeah, we theorized, and other people too, that they would have Helena jump from the balcony, which, by the way, foreshadowing there, her being on the balcony multiple times at the end and in front of the window several other times, is that we thought maybe when Aemon dies that she would jump. It doesn't look like they're going that way because Helena doesn't like Aemon. She's accusing him of killing their brother, trying to kill their brother, and all this other stuff. So I don't think that she will be so broken up over his death, especially since she just called it out, well in advance.
So, which has me back to her being murdered, which still 2 good candidates in Larys and Mysaria both. Like,
yep.
two murder candidates, but also if she just wasn't in King's Landing, she could be murdered a different way.
I'm going to go with Mysaria.
That's your
now,
call
my
right
early
now?
prediction, yeah, because I think that's going to be one of the troubling conflicts that comes is Mysaria wants revenge on the High Towers, and Rhaenyra is maybe not going to want to go as far with some of those things, especially Helena. And this could be a person that they differ over. If Mysaria takes her revenge out on High Towers in general, and one of them is Helena, who's someone that Rhaenyra has specifically and explicitly said is an innocent, that could cause some serious conflict. And I do expect there to be conflict between Rhaenyra and Mysaria and Daemon. Maybe a little love triangle-y stuff, perhaps. So I'm glad that they kept Helena in a role that makes her more active, and rather than being someone too traumatized to do basically anything whatsoever. And I liked Eric Arik. I like the way they handled that. It's not that different from the book. We covered it in a separate episode, so the differences they did make, I won't repeat here. I do like that they preserved it as a direct response to Blood and Cheese. The line in the book from Kristen Cole is, "We will pay the princess back in her own bloody coin." That's pretty much the sentiment here. Now, one thing I wondered about, I expected to happen that didn't happen, although maybe it has and we just haven't been shown, is Larys using the secret passages in the Red Keep. It happens at some point in the book. We don't find out when it starts, but he definitely does start using them. There's no evidence he has in the show, however. I thought he would start using maybe that's how he escapes with Aegon. Maybe that's how they got out and we just weren't shown that.
Yeah. And so here's my thought is that one of the things Ryan Condal said in interviews is that they think a lot about like who are the POV characters in the show, right? Like they still think of it in that terms. And Larys isn't a POV character. We're not following Larys in his scenes. Yes, I think that would be the time that we would have seen is when he got out with Aegon. And that's what I would suspect is that they used that method to get out. But no, it's not confirmed at all.
So we'll wait and see on that, and it could be how they come back and re-arrive or what have you. And I'm curious about that. Certainly, more on Larys and Aegon and their escape in a bit. Let's talk about Alicent and Criston Cole. At first, I really was like, I don't know about this when I saw their relationship, but in the long run, I liked it a lot. It was sensible and well executed add-on. I know there was a lot of discomfort with seeing it at first, but in the long run, it really proved to be a good change. For one thing, it was quick and efficient. Those love scenes between Criston and Alicent probably added up to a total of 5 minutes across all the episodes, not including their conversations out in public that would include some of that context. I just mean the actual moments of them together. Like seriously, 5 to 6 minutes total. And for Alicent, it makes a lot of sense because it's a human thing and not a huge change in her story, but it does make her a hypocrite, and it enables her to see her own hypocrisy because of the guilt over blood and cheese and things like that. And then when she talks to Rhaenyra and gets confronted over some of these things, and yeah, it undoes some of what she had taught herself, which is part of her arc this season, is undoing what she believes her duty is and rediscovering herself and saying, hey, I'm going to do what I think is right, not what I think my duty is. Before, the two things were the same to her. Doing her duty was what was right. But now she's realizing that's not true. And this was part of that. Her relationship kind of helped her find that. It was the light, some of the silver lining at the end of the tunnel there. And it made Criston's character way more well-rounded. It makes his devotion to her more tangible. It's like the one light he has in this world, which I think is pretty compelling. And his passivity in her fall, when he's very guilty over not standing up for her, and just he can't even look at her when she's losing power in the council, and he doesn't support her for regent, and only Orwyle does. It's that scenes like that hit way harder because of that, because of their personal connection, and it's things like that I didn't necessarily see coming. And
added to his dynamic with Gwaine Hightower.
Yes.
Like, yeah, I think it only enriched things, and I don't think it really detracted from anything to me. So I don't ship the two of them, but I think it made for good TV and added a lot to the characters. You know what I mean? Like,
Fully agree. Yeah. Again, my initial reaction wasn't positive, but it became positive in the long run. Criston's planning with Aemond early on was a big part, but then they kind of not betrayed each other, but Aemond just moved on from Criston as an ally and just treated him as a subordinate and not very honorably, which might set up their falling out in the Riverlands. If you recall from the book, they argue over how to conduct the war going forward. Criston seems to have the smarter plan, say, hey, let's go south and link up with the Hightower army, the big army that we have. Let's go form a big host. And Aemond's like, nah, only cowards run from traitors. Like, what does that even mean? Only cowards run from traitors? I mean, don't people who want to win use good strategies, and not running when you're overwhelmed is just dumb. So I think that's fitting that they've set Aemond up that way. But let's stay focused on Criston for the moment. So I really like the rounding out of Criston Cole. We talked about it with Sean quite a bit. Sean's perspective was very interesting throughout the season because he doesn't have the book perspective, doesn't have the hate that a lot of us have for this character. And he was really good. I mean, not good in the ethical sense, but just great performance. I enjoyed the rounding out of him. I thought it was very compelling that he became traumatized, and we got to see him, the version of him before that, the way he took Duskendale. It was a really dark, well-executed scene with him executing people. And Rookrest itself. Yeah, executing a Darkling. Yeah, right. Very fitting. All the names are right there. So, and Rookrest itself was extremely well done. Not just the battle, which of course was great, but I mean, Criston's role in it, his disassociating, his waking up, his energy at the beginning of the battle, his confidence, the way it turned, his horror at seeing what happened to the king, and his dueling roles of Lord Commander and Hand of the King. Yeah, it was very good. And one small difference is it's Larys who draws up the list of people to go after. Larys is a lot more directly involved in council stuff in the book. One change is Viserys has no Master of Whispers. He says he has no need of one. Well, that's just not the case in the book. Larys is Master of Whispers pretty early on in Viserys' reign and just keeps the job. So I'm not sure why they changed that. I'm still struggling with the point of that change, but it's not a big change either.
I think it's better to give a character something to aspire to have a growth arc, for him to change. That they wanted him to have a point A and a point B arc, It
shows more of it helps build his connection to Aegon, which is more important.
Yeah, and it builds his connection to Aegon. Yeah, it just gives him an arc to go on versus just he is there.
That's a good point. Yeah. Which I think is part of what they did with some of the Dragon Siege. They didn't want everything to just be the same. Just have these guys are just
or with Daemon, right? Like
that
we talked about, like you want him to end up at the point he's at in the book, perhaps, but it's more interesting to see him get to that point than to just he is like that.
Yeah, good point. So it might just be that simple. And again, I don't criticize the change. I don't automatically criticize changes just because I don't understand them. I mean, if I was in the writer's room, I would understand it and I might disagree. But sometimes they make these changes based on things that are a season or two away, and we just haven't seen that payoff or haven't perceived it.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. That I try to keep that perspective in mind. I think I brought it up when I said my complaints about Ray Nettles, which is I can't fully judge it until I've seen her arc play out.
Yeah, like I have some complaints about some things that happened in episode 8 later in this episode that we're doing right now, but I also have that caveat included because it's like, well, this is an incomplete plot line, so let's see what they do with it. And that's why I really encourage people not to. You don't have to judge a scene right away. There's no reason you have to finish watching a scene and decide what you think of it. You can shelve that for later. I know a lot of our personalities don't work that way, and you want to form an opinion right away. I'm personally not like that. So maybe that just works better for me, but it's also just who I am. I don't feel the need to judge right away. I'm comfortable waiting. I know not a lot of people aren't. So more about Criston. I think that he surely won't make it through season 3. That seems very likely. He's going to die partway towards the end of the season, maybe. I don't think early in the season, probably later in the season. And the irony, I suppose, will be that it won't be dragons that kills him, even though that's what he perceives. That the war has been given to the dragons. We march toward our annihilation. Well, yeah, you're going to be annihilated, but it won't be by dragons, unless they change that, which is possible. Maybe Caraxes will kill him. That's the only dragon I could think of that would kill him. They would have to be significant changes otherwise. So the big question is whether Gwaine will also die with him. Gwaine Hightower, great change. This character is basically a nobody in the show, or in the book. He has almost no personality at all. All he does is accuse Luthor Largent of being a traitor, and then Largent kills him. It's like, okay, that was big arc for you there, Gwaine. Not only did they give him more to do, they gave him something important to do. Having someone as Cole's foil, someone to talk to on campaign. Like, what's Criston Cole going to do on his campaign? We're just going to see him going from place to place. Yeah, he needed someone to talk to. Better this guy. Better Freddie Fox, a great actor, than just his squire.
See, this is why I think he'll survive the battles with Criston, is that this will be someone to go home and report to Alicent or who, I don't remember, I would not directly, but send letters or whatever.
Yeah.
Either way, it would be someone that would report on what happened there.
And he would be a valuable hostage, which Cole may not be. He doesn't have a family that would pay a lot for him.
Yeah.
But the Hightowers, like, this is the heir to the Hightower. Like, killing him would be kind of dumb. Like, this guy's worth a ton.
He's not the heir to the Hightower.
I'm sorry, you're right. He's not. He's the heir. He's Otto's heir. He's not the heir to the Hightower.
He's a side cousin Hightower.
He's a side cousin.
He's really not an important Hightower, but they probably would still ransom
He's still a
him.
Hightower.
He would still get ransom.
He would still get ransom. Yeah, it's still mad money there. You're right. It's not as much as Ormond's son, whoever that even is right now. I forget. But big fan of Gwaine, the changes they made to him, because it's not just Cole. The conversation he has with Alicent is also really good. He has a couple conversations with her, It's the second one that I really like. That's the one that I remember. The one where he's just being fatalistic. And
he talks about Daron.
Talks about how they both had separate duties and how being raised at the Red Keep isn't great. Maybe it's not the most salubrious environment, right? Is what he says, like salubrious. Nice big word there. Yeah, big fan of Gwain's changes. This is a perfect example of a character that they fleshed out from almost nothing, and it's like they did a good job with it.
What I'm really rooting for is to see Gwain in the Daron plotline.
Yeah.
For Gwain to go ride with Daron's army eventually, and
that could be really good.
Maybe that could be who's. If he isn't part of the Caltrops plot and killed that way, if Daron is close to Gwain, that could break Daron because it seems like that's one of the closest family members Daron would have ever known.
That's a good point. That could work out really well. And the law of conservation of characters does sort of imply Gwain has more to do because of the Reach arc with Tumbleton and the Caltrops. Yeah, I'm coming around on that. I still think Otto will be the one to drink the poison, but I think you're right. But I'm agreeing with you that Gwain will survive the Riverlands.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm giving you an alternate way for Gwain to die. If he's not going to drink the poison with the Caltrops, then he would be killed, and Daron would be very upset by this.
That could fit very much. So Alicent, now that is another thing that will be bigger. When Criston Cole dies, because they had a relationship, his death will have a bigger impact on her, right? That will matter to her more. It won't be like, okay, well, we lost the Hand of the King. We lost Lord Commander of the King's Guard. He was my protector, but I wasn't like in love with him or anything. Now she'll be broken up about it. It'll have a bigger impact on her. It's not fridging because he's a big character. He's a main character, but it will have a big impact on her. And
she's not in love with him.
She's not in love with him. She had strong feelings for him.
She was her lover. He was her lover, but not in love with him.
Yeah, she's sort of like the only he's sort of the only option, there's worse options. Like he's very good looking, but there's less problematic options probably.
She could have gotten with Arik.
Yeah. That's right. She's like, wait, is this ours? Like, what do you mean, my queen? We don't have a relationship. Like, oh, Eric? Oh, whoops. Damn it. Now they both know. Yeah. So Alicent, I think, probably suffered the most from having the least to do in the book. So they had to create more scenes from her. And that's harder to do with her when she's such a focus than it is with, say, a Gwain Hightower, who is a side character. It reminds me a bit of Dany and Karth. Less contrived than the show version of Dany and Karth, but think about just all the stolen dragons and the weird stuff with everyone being killed in the meeting and all that. That was just weird. I didn't really like that. And to be fair, Dany's Karth scenes, I love them, but they're probably her least interesting arc of all of the 4 books that she's in. They're definitely the shortest. So if you grade them all equally, well, then that's the weakest one, because if quality is equal, then it's got the least quantity. But it also has one of the most important scenes of her entire arc, which is the House of the Undying. So, like, it goes to show that even in her least important book, she still has an incredibly important scene. So I continue to wonder, this brings me back to Alicent saying, well, I wonder if they're going to have her delve into things like prophecy and history, which kind of relates to, the House of the Undying, because that's Daenerys. A lot of that is about her family's ancient history and dragons and the first dragon riders and some really cool, fun, supernatural, ancient stuff.
Yeah, I was really hoping that the added plot lines that they would give to Alicent would intersect more with Helena, and they did at the very end there. But, like, if they were adding more material for her, I would have liked to see her realizing that Helena has prophecies or spending time with her. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you're going to add stuff, that's what I would have added, I think.
Yeah, I was disappointed it didn't go a little farther. But again, maybe that's a factor of the season being cut short. Maybe they do have that plan. Maybe that's coming. The more time Alicent spends with Helena, the more I expect that to happen. And if it doesn't, then yeah, that disappointment will build. On the other hand, I thought her fall from power was extremely well done, even though it doesn't happen in the book so much. Well, it does in that when she loses King's Landing, but in terms of losing power internally within her own faction, that's not so much in the book. But I like how they did it in the show. The scene where she disassociates in council, that was fantastic. Her scene with Larys was really good. And again, as I said, her scene with Gwain. But I didn't really like the swimming in the lake scene. I understand it, but I had to have it explained to me. It's not great when even someone like me, who's hyper focused on the show and just thinking about interpretations all the time, I couldn't really figure out what was going on in that scene. It was only the behind the scenes that explained it to me. And I'm pretty forgiving with, If it's not explained, if you have to watch behind the scenes to figure it out, some people call that bad writing. I don't go that far. This is a very subtle show, and we want subtlety. We want nuance. That means we're going to miss things sometimes. So I don't think that if it has to be spelled out, or if it's not clear in the scene, then that makes it bad writing. I do not agree with that. That's an argument for less nuance, less subtlety. So no. But this was too subtle. Didn't understand what was going on.
And I think you thought that just a simple change in how they filmed it would have communicated volumes to us, right? Like, just one more beat in that scene could have done that.
And so what keeps it from being more of a failure was that it was very short. It's like hard to complain too much about a really short scene. And I'm like, okay, well, and she needed a scene like that. It just wasn't executed well because I didn't understand what was going on. On the other hand, the setup for Alicent Chains, the Queen in Chains, is pretty interesting because she's gonna have to convince Rhaenyra that she had nothing to do with Aegon leaving.
Which is hard to believe. If I was Rhaenyra, I would simply not believe that Alicent had nothing to do with this. It's really damning. Like,
I wouldn't either, yeah.
I wouldn't believe it. Like, you would seem like an idiot to believe her.
But it's also true in the book. In Alicent seems to have no idea where Aegon and Larys went in the book as well. So it's carried over from the book on top of that. So it's included. So she's less defensive of her sons in the show. In the book, she's like, my sons are everything. You know, Aemond will return to take King's Landing with fire and blood. She's total faith in him. Whereas here in the show, she's like, you know what he is. And she's been saying that kind of thing for a while. So she regrets how she raised her sons. She regrets what they've become. And she's not a great mother. All those things are... Now, that part was probably carried over from the book. I don't think she was a great mother in the book either. This being extra and more protective of Helena and Jaehaera is a bit of a change. It's kind of like, well, instead of being protective of her entire family, she sees the problem in the show and is trying to protect the ones she can, which is also a function of her having less power. So this is another one where it's hard to fully judge because it's just now, this part of the story is just now beginning. Technically, she's still in King's Landing and Rhaenyra hasn't even taken it yet. So like that's maybe episode 2 or 3 next season. But until that happens, we can't even be sure that there aren't some big change that's going to throw a monkey wrench into our prior analysis. So we'll have to come back to that.
I do love how much of a help this is to Mysaria and convincing Rhaenyra to go against Alicent.
Yeah,
she has a pretty good argument to make here.
Mysaria won't believe it either. The escape thing, like, no, of course she's lying to you. Yeah, like,
exactly.
Mysaria will probably encourage her to disbelieve that. Yeah,
I'm so curious, really, because like Rhaenyra and Alicent had this conversation privately. You have to assume the next thing Rhaenyra did is tell her mistress of whispers, right? Like, that's the person she should tell about this. She's not just going to be like, oh, trust me, let's just go to King's Landing. She's going to tell her, Alicent came, we talked about this, and this. You might imagine Mysaria would say, don't trust her. Like, I'm so curious if Mysaria would say from the get-go, this is a poisoned chalice that she's giving you or what, and then will be proven right.
Yeah. It's really tough, yeah, but I think that's why I say the setup is very interesting because, yeah, the dynamic between Mysaria and Rhaenyra is going to have an impact. So will the Daemon dynamic, because we should see Daemon back in the fold, at least for a little while, all of them together. There could be Daemon, Rhaenyra, and Alicent and Mysaria all together at King's Landing. Not to mention Helena, Jaehaera, and some of the others. So that could be really interesting.
I'm really excited for is Daemon coming face to face with Helena.
Helena, who was in his dream. Yeah, what the hell?
Nice to see you again. Like, yeah. I'm so curious.
Like, we have something to talk about. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. Let's talk about King's Landing a little bit. Aemond closes the gates instead of Alicent. That's ultimately not a huge change. It's basically taking Alicent's book qualities, her tyrannical qualities that she has in the book, and giving them to Aemond. I think a lot of that was done.
Yeah, I think it's a major change to some people who really are on edge about whitewashing of characters, period, and whitewashing of female characters, which is, I think, a hot button topic that a lot of people feel that the women are not allowed to be as problematic and bad in the show. And I think that for me, the jury is out. I think they're letting them get to that point. But like,
I think we're seeing them turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, they start good and they will not stay good. Like, Rhaenyra is not going to stay good.
she's already bringing up burning Lannisport and Old Town, which is very dark to bring up, like pretty casually. Like she doesn't give it the full weight that it deserves to do such a dark thing.
And I've been calling out the red flags in Missaria for a long time, and how that's going to be bad. That's going to be problematic. This relationship, and that's in a good way, like in a conflicting, interesting, dramatic way. So yeah, I definitely agree that you can see from a certain angle, you can see that these characters are made nicer and more conscientious, the female characters in particular, some of the male characters too. Just the realm is a little bit kinder in a lot of ways.
But I think it speaks to the propaganda in Fire and Blood and the spin. For some of them, they're explained that way, And I also think, Alicent choosing to sacrifice her sons and commit treason against her family is a pretty problematic thing that she's doing. Like, I think that's I don't know.
It's questionable. Like, I think it comes off to the audience as a good thing to a lot of, because most of the audience is on the side of the black, so they see like her siding with Rhaenyra as a good thing, but like in the context of Westeros, it's pretty treasonous. It's pretty bad.
I see a lot of people coming at Alicent for betraying her children.
Yeah, that's
specifically.
bad.
They find that to be a betrayal of motherhood, or a pretty universal human trait is to care for your closest kin.
Yeah.
So I think people find that to be troublesome.
I get that. I don't agree with it because there's plenty of mothers. And I don't want motherhood to be that. I don't think it is. That you defend your children against everything.
I agree.
I think humanity is better off if mothers can call out their own children. And if you're the mother of a king and the king is a horrible king, you shouldn't go down with that ship. I don't think you're a bad mother if you admit that.
Yes, exactly. I agree. I totally agree. And so it's debatable whether this is a truly dark turn by Alicent or a noble turn,
it's gray.
Yeah. Gray,
I think it's gray, which is very human. Yeah. And so I think that's what they did, is they took for now, Alicent's worst actions have been given to Aemond or to Aegon even. And maybe that will stay, maybe not. It's harder to foresee Alicent turning darker, whereas it's kind of easy to see Rhaenyra at this point, where she's going off kilter, off towards prophecy and drinking her own Kool-Aid and things like that.
I think Alicent's darker will just be her depressed.
Just her lack of power, her seeing her having to betray her own family and
imprisoned, right?
And then maybe losing her daughter and losing Kristen Cole and.
Yeah, like just being the last one left and just being imprisoned. And
we know how she ends, just basically a lunatic who just loses it, like it's a cruel thing to say, but that's what happened. She even the color green like causes her trauma later as she's getting older. So like she pretty much loses it, I think, but probably not during the context of the show, like just over the years of living with her guilt and grief and everything. So the Meleys reaction was very similar. That was Kristen Cole's idea to parade the head through the streets, very similar to the books. And I like how they even brought it out a little more. They had some specifics. They don't mention the doctrine of exceptionalism, but its vibes were all over the place. Seeing the dragons as gods and fearing the reaction of the other gods to seeing one of the gods being killed. This is where I defend the Rhaenys scene from last season and say that I think people exaggerate how big a deal that was. But I do have criticisms of that scene. Don't rest easy if you think I'm defending it fully. I just don't go as far. I think that because the dragons are seen as gods, that is part of the excuse. People just kings get away with things. Queens get away with things. Gods get away with. Real world politicians are immune to laws that affect all the rest of us, even though everyone says the law applies to them, but we see time and time again it doesn't. So that's the law, not necessarily consequences. This is kind of both. Like there's no law. Rhaenys didn't break a law by breaking through the floor of the dragon pit. I also don't think thousands of people would have died in that. Maybe 100. I don't even think hundreds.
I think they said hundreds in like someone who had to do like VFX or something. Okay. Anyways, regardless, I think I was bothered by it more until I saw who was behind the act of parading Meleys' head. Mm-hmm. I think if someone like Otto, who is a more competent spin master, was behind that, they would have pushed that. as part of it, or it just wouldn't have happened in the first place. But I just don't think Kristen and Gwaine were canny enough to realize that they needed to bring up Rhaenys and Meleys, hurting a bunch of small folk, right?
Yeah.
So that is what salvaged that for me, because I was one of those people that was like, why aren't they bringing this up? And I think Kristen and Gwaine.
And here's where I think it fails, because they made a big deal out of executing the rat catchers. Well, how is it a big deal to execute the rat catchers if it wasn't a big deal to kill those other people?
Yeah.
I don't know that you can have it both ways. One is, and here's how you can. The killing of the people in the dragon pit wasn't a big public thing. Sure, a lot of people heard about it, but it wasn't weeks of the rat catchers hanging from the walls of the Red Keep, which is different.
That's a very gruesome thing. Everyone is seeing it constantly. It's getting worse and worse.
It's a reminder. It's a lack of justice flaunted. So maybe they went a little too far with that. I don't know that Otto would have lost his temper over something like that. I don't think the consequences would have been that severe, but it's not like a complete goof or anything like that. I would say I struggled with a little bit, so I have some criticism of that. I think they could have done that a little bit better, but I don't think that it was just a complete failure or anything. I do like the propaganda plot. I do like the port inspection thing about Aemon's escalating. Just, I don't want to deal with this. Just fix it. That's how I perceive him in the book. He's not given any political decisions. Book Aemond is just yeah, you guys keep running things. Yeah, I'm the regent now. I'm the Prince Regent, protector of the realm. But I just want to conduct the war. He doesn't care about managing the city. It's not important to him. So they carry that over pretty well, having Aemond. They change Aemond from just not caring, from delegating, to Aemond making bad decisions instead of delegating, which is not a big difference. It almost works better because it raises the stakes a bit. It shows how Aemond is floundering as a ruler, which builds his rage and embarrassment, which also has been built up very nicely into what that does to him. It makes him lash out. Goes back to his childhood, so I think that's pretty well set up. The walk and talk with Ironrod, he just closes the ports off. That just would make no sense, I don't mean no sense as a writing device. I mean him doing that is silly. They already got their dragon riders. This just goes to show he's not thinking about these things. So Book Aemond was just you guys take care of all this. I'm going to go conduct the war. Show Aemond is just gives quick, foolish decisions. Not that different. No propaganda plot either way in the book. There's no sneaking into the bars and stirring things up. But the riot and all that, but similar things did happen. There's none of this Rhaenyra the Cruel or Aemon's having parties and dances, but there is still the general building up of unrest throughout many decisions made by the Greens and Blacks. So they got there in the same way. It still caused the unrest within the city. Some of it was similar, some of it wasn't. One of the biggest changes, I think, was how they did the Dragon Seed, but they merged all that together. We'll get to that in a minute. Here's a quote from the book. This is how this refers to the blockade and shows how some of these things were pretty similar as well.
The Sea Snake's fleets closed Blackwater Bay, and every morning King Aegon had merchants whining at him. His Grace had no answer for their complaints beyond another cup of strong wine.
That's pretty much what we saw, right? He's like, oh, don't worry about the blockade. I'm going to take care of that pretty soon with the dragons. And then, other stuff happened. So the riot in the books comes when the Sea Snakes actually invades. When the blockade becomes an invasion, that's when people really panic and run and all that happens, which might still happen in episode 10 or episode 2 of next season. It would have been episode 10 this season, probably. So Alicent deciding to open the gates for Rhaenyra is a big character change, assuming that actually happens. I think it is. Aegon being gone is not, though going to Braavos might be. I still wonder if they're going to have Jaehaera go to Storm's End, or because that's what happens in the book. She goes to Storm's End in the book and then just rides it out. She's safe. Nothing happens. She's when the war ends, she gets brought to King's Landing and marries Aegon III. So that's a pretty simple thing for them to keep intact. They might decide to do different things with it. Who knows? Maybe they'll have her die. I don't know how they would end the show if she's dead. They could go straight to Daenerys. I don't know. That would be kind of weird. I kind of doubt they'll do that, but this could be Bitterbridge instead.
Yeah, it wouldn't feel as poetically satisfying as a wrap up. Even though again it doesn't actually come to anything.
Yeah.
It seems like, oh, this is the perfect little fusion, but then it isn't. It is.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense to have a two children whose families went through horror to get to this point, but you still have a member of each family that sits the throne at the end. It's like just to show like you're back to square one without dragons.
But then again, it's not like that's the line that anything is descended from. So ultimately, it matters on a symbolic level, but it doesn't ever matter on a plot level.
Exactly, which is why I think it's still which is why it's potentially something that could change.
Yeah, she could. I mean, she could be killed. She could just still just go to Storm's End. She could stay in King's Landing and be a little girl there. I don't know. I mean, I would like to see the Baratheons brought back into the plot in some way, so that would satisfy that for me.
Yeah, and the book Baratheons don't do anything, right? Not till phase 4. I like the equivalent would be we probably won't see the Baratheons until season 4. Maybe they'll start being active at the end of season 3. But yeah, in the book, it's the same thing. When Boros finally gets his army together, he goes to fight the Vulture King instead. He's
him,
like, you know what? I got these other problems. And then and the rumor is, and it's said in Fire and Blood, it's like the rumor is that he's afraid of dragons. So he's like, there's no dragons in Dorne. I'll go fight them.
Sounds like a really smart man, honestly.
Yeah,
I would do go
and then
fight them. Yeah.
He's the only guy with an intact army at the end, basically, until the River Lords get their act together, and then he kind of goofs that up. So yeah, he plays it really well, and then screws up the end game. He's like,
Boros sucks.
Yeah, it's like, man, you did it so well, and then you goofed it so badly. Like, you fumbled at the 1 yard line, A little football reference for you. So the other big change, of course, or one of the other big changes potentially, is Otto not being at King's Landing. And we've kind of discussed this already. He's been made into a more important character. Rhys Ifans is a fantastic actor. Law of conservation of characters, all that. Otto's not getting executed at the taking of King's Landing. We don't know where he is. He's been captured, right? But I doubt he's in the dungeons of the Red Keep. Someone would find him there, right? If he is, then maybe he will just get executed, which would be very disappointing because, like, what's the point of where is he? Only to have him be in the most obvious spot.
I think even the people who think that shot of him in the dungeons, even the people that think that was the Red Keep, generally think that was like Laurie's moving him out of his hostage, taking him. So like, I don't think they think Laurie's kept him in the Red Keep. I know some people weirdly think that Mysaria is aligned with the Gold Cloaks and is holding Otto at the Red Keep, and that's why Mysaria hasn't told Rhaenyra. I don't think that's very likely, but technically that is a theory that I have seen. I think I've seen like 4 good permutations on theories, which are Beesbury's, Bitterbridge, Larys, and he took Otto away. Mysaria, and she is because through the Gold Cloaks. I think that's the weakest to me.
Yeah, I don't like either of the theories that he was taken by Black's or Green's main characters. I don't like either of them. I don't think either of them make much sense. I'm with you. I'm with you. Beesbury, Bitterbridge, something else entirely. Yeah, I don't think it's Mysaria or Larys. I don't think either of those make a lot of sense. Larys how he conceal Otto from Aegon if they're traveling together. It just doesn't really work. Yeah.
That's the only thing I like about the Larys thing really is that it's hysterical to me that like he's like, go get Otto, and Larys is like, okay. And then he's in prison.
He's like, I'll get him and put him in jail. So all this Deanna, Sylvie, Ulf, Hugh, Cat stuff is pretty new. Like obviously Ulf and Hugh have no backstory in the show or in the book, and quite a bit of backstory in the show now, which is nice. We all liked seeing them filled out more. I think almost everybody universally appreciated having backstories for them, even if maybe quibble over some of the specific details. Having them more fleshed out is great. We still wonder about Sylvie, whether she'll be Sylvana or one of these plot lines. I hope so. It makes sense. She's got it out for Aemond now. Deanna's got it out for Aegon. They have good reasons to be, especially Deanna, for disliking them.
Yeah, I'm currently on board. Mysaria, Sylvie, Deanna will all be rolled up into the Sylvana Sand SE plotline. Exactly in what way and in what ways it'll resonate with that plotline, I'm not sure. Like it doesn't have to be a romance between them. It doesn't have to be, it could be 3 women involved. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be a 1-to-1 comparison, but I think those 3 women will have to do with the Game and Pale Pear Moon of 3 Kings plotline.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where I see it going too. So I think this was done, a lot of this was done for efficiency, and I appreciate it because they combined the Dragonseed stuff with the plot, with the propaganda stuff. Otherwise, they would have had to do scenes in Dragonstone and King's Landing, and by doing them together, they were able to flesh out a lot more characters. And I really like that they referenced Viserys' reign, that they made it a touchstone of their propaganda to say, "Ooh, look how bad things are," when the peaceful king's chosen heir is over there not getting to reign like what the peaceful king wanted. That was a really good thing for them to emphasize. Also, good thing to emphasize, but very dark, is Kat mentioning that she has family and a brother in Tumbleton, which Tumbleton is where all these horrors will go down. I do think that's the most likely thing we were seeing in Daemon's vision was Tumbleton. To me, that dragon was Sea Smoke, but more on that later.
Oh, that's interesting. I thought even though it didn't look like Caraxes, it's just so weird to me that it wouldn't have anything to do with Daemon and his. So that's a cool call. I like it. Looked kind of like Sea Smoke.
It looked like Sea Smoke to me.
But my question is whether we think Cat will be killed by Hugh or by a different dragon seed. I think she'll be killed in the chaos, but I'm like, do I think it's more painful and better? Like, what do I think is better if it is whether it's Hugh or a different dragon? You know what I mean? I don't know what I think makes for better TV to me.
I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm not sure. I'm agree with you that it's got a lot to do with the coming conflict and maybe it has to do something with his turn, but I don't know. They could do it either way. I don't know that I favor any option over the other. So her relationship with Aemond is new, the Sylvie stuff, but it also helps. Not only does it help set up potential Daemon Palehair stuff and the Moon of the Three Kings, it's also set up for how he will relate to Alice, which is a big, important thing. And looking forward to that, because Alice's relationship with Aemond is going to be pretty different than her relationship with Daemon. Daemon. Putting them all into one character. At least it seems that way. Would you agree? Probably, Shay, it's going to look pretty different.
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to be a physical, intimate relationship, which Daemon, that's not a way to move him. Daemon isn't manipulatable by sex, but Aemond is.
Yeah, you said the key word there, that she's going to be manipulating Aemond, and so she's going to play up everything that she thinks will ensnare Aemond. And
it won't be guilt like it was for Daemon.
Yeah, that's going to be like, being a MILF.
Yeah, that he's already got a thing for MILFs, and she knows she's going to know that and be able to play on it better than even Sylvie probably could.
Yeah, I would be so curious if her costuming, like if she will...
She's going to change how she looks a little?
Yeah, if she will, there's just subtle ways that you can make someone just have a slightly older vibe, even if she's just putting her hair up, kind of does that sometimes. So I would be curious.
That'll be really neat, yeah. What if her hair has changed? She's like curly or red or something like that.
Yeah, that would be so funny.
Or blonde. Yeah. She looks like a Targaryen.
Yeah, no, I think he doesn't. I guess, if you want to go with the Helena element, you would say silver. But yeah, if you're going with Alice and Mommy issues, you would say red.
Yeah, have her have Lorathi hair, like silver on one side, red on the other.
But no, I think a lot of it, more than appearance, will be the way she treats him and demeanor. Will emphasize that type of treatment. Yeah,
I agree. Coin shortages were something that was kind of under the radar, that was brought up several times at the Green Councils, that they're having trouble with money. And of course, if y'all recall from the book, that's a big problem for Rhaenyra. It's the number one thing that gets her reign to falter and fail, is the overtaxation of an already very taxed populace. I don't know that they will handle it the exact same way, but yeah, it's tricky, and I wonder. So, just a little bit of setup there. Let's take a quick break here, and then get back to it. I've been really enjoying our Magic Mind drinks. Getting through the season, like I said, was really difficult with all the extra work we have to do, all the thinking about... I can't stop myself. I have to think about House of the Dragon and the books constantly. I do it because I'm a fan, and I do it because it's my living. So it's a double whammy. But all that thinking can make your brain tired. And all this editing that Ashea does and all this writing that I do, we put in a lot of time during the season. Magic Mind has really helped us do better, to have more energy, to be able to last a little longer with our thinking, to sleep a little better, to wake up a little better, to use a little less caffeine during the day. Really, really helpful. I'm a big fan of the product. I think I told you all before, during the off season when we were in between deals with them, we kept buying it with our own money rather than just getting the freebies they sent us, because we do like it that much. And that goes for all of us. Ashea is a big fan. Sean has talked about how much he likes it. They've got a new, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I don't drink caffeine really at all generally, so it was a more major difference for me. And I would go buy a drink at the store, so it really wasn't that difference to just have it shipped to me. So I love it.
You can take advantage of the new deal that they have, which is our new code VIPHOW20. That's VIPHOW20. Go to magicmind.com and use that code to get 20% off on your first order. And with other benefits available, sometimes you can get even other discounts. So sign up now, get a subscription, and see how it works for you. I bet you'll have positive results like we have. Given how well it's worked for us, I would suspect you'll have positive results as well. Your mileage may vary, but I'd be really surprised if it just did nothing at all for you. I think it would have a serious benefit. So check it out, VIP How 20, magicmind.com. Get started today. And check out my shirt. Look at this awesome shirt I have. It's our Dance of the Dragon shirt. Ashea designed it. On the back are the tour dates. Ashea is putting that up on screen so you can see those tour dates. And the tour dates, like a tour, of course, these are the different battles of the Dance of the Dragons. Harrenhal, Shipbreaker Bay, Burning Mill, Stonehenge, Duskendale, Rook's Rest, the Gullet, Honeywine, Rook's Rest again, the Red Fork, Acorn Hall, King's Landing, the Fish Feed, Long Table, Bitterbridge, Butcher's Ball, Tumbleton, Dragonstone, the God's Eye, the Dragon Pit, the Ruins of Tumbleton, and the Muddy Mess.
Can I tell you?
That's a lot of battles left, aren't there?
I used this as a reference throughout the season multiple times. I was like, what else do we have coming up? What's the order? And I used it to orient myself a lot. I found it really useful.
Right on.
And yeah, there are a lot. As you see, we haven't reached the Gullet. We are between Rook's Rest and the Gullet at this point in time. And you can also see the way that they've moved some things around, or could theoretically move things around, what we may or may not see, right? Like it seems that the Red Fork is going to be around the same time as the Gullet instead, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Fall of King's Landing as well. So like we're the Acorn Hall, Rook's Rest again, the Honeywine probably no.
Well, yeah, slight order changes maybe here and there, but yeah. Basically, it still works really well, and of course, it's exactly right for the book. Ashea, tell them where they can get that shirt.
You can go to historyofwesteros.threadless.com and you can get this shirt in either this white variant or there's a black variant that I did as well because I like a black shirt and all that. But yeah, there's two variants. It's like a double-sided shirt, so you can get it front and back like a standard tour poster. You can get it printed as a tour poster and put it on your wall. Anyways, I'm very proud. I had this vision for this concept, and I didn't expect it to be so useful to me throughout the season, but I love it.
Right on. Okay, small council and some miscellaneous stuffs about that. The Drinking's Guard are, of course, not in the book, but they were sent to the wall really quickly, so they were just in and out. Obviously, that's a small enough change. Otto was fired a bit earlier in the show. Not a big change, though. And I gave my theory on his death, and we talked about his disappearance already. Cole versus Otto. Yeah, that was a small change. Versus when the executions will happen and all that. So we'll see how that goes. One small difference with Aemond is he takes the field a little sooner in the book because he was rushing to get to battle, whereas here in the show he stays around a little bit longer because he's got a little bit more burden of the rule. But ultimately, as I said, not big a difference. The Vale. Let's talk about the Vale. The presence of the kids there isn't super different because they just end up leaving for Pentos anyway, right? And that's where they end up in the books. Well, they don't actually. They get caught on the way by the Triarchy. Now, it's unclear whether this could happen a different way. Maybe they just get captured on the way back. I'm not sure. But them getting captured by elements of the Triarchy, maybe Pentos turns on, maybe this Prince Reggio abandons them and hands them over to the Triarchy. It's not going to be, I doubt it's going to be all that different. In the book, it's Jace's plan, one of several things that is Jace's plan instead of Rhaenyra's. Rhaenyra is, as I said at the beginning, Rhaenyra was sidelined longer in the book, and Jace does a lot of these things. So basically, the show just took some of these things from Jace and gave them back to Rhaenyra instead. The line that Lady Jane says, "I mislike feeling powerless," is straight from the book. The line, "Armies have broken themselves on her bloody gate," straight from the book. That comment about Visenya, and how Visenya was the one that broke them because of Vagar, straight from the book. So they kept a lot of Lady Jane's dialogue. The delay of troops, also straight from the book. She has 15,000 troops ready to go, but she doesn't send them in part because of, presumably, because she wasn't happy with the fine print of the dragon contract business there. They do eventually march in the book, but it's the same thing. In the show and the book, they haven't marched at this point yet.
I'm not going to lie. I was really disappointed in the Vale. I liked Jane Eyre, but I feel like it would have been very easy for them to simply show another woman at the Vale with her. Not even a speaking role.
Yeah.
And a lot of fans would have been like, it's Jessamine Redford. You know what I mean? Like,
really easy to do that.
Really
I agree.
Easy. It's one of those things where I'm like, oh, come on, please.
Just put her in there, yeah.
It's just no
super
words,
easy.
No words
One
necessary.
other actor doesn't have to talk.
Yeah, like when she's saying goodbye, if there was just a woman standing next to her, like that would speak volumes to everyone.
It would have given people what they wanted. Yeah, it would have been very easy to do.
You know, that's my little bit of saltiness. But I actually did really like the actress and portrayal of Jane Eyre. She was very powerful.
And so part of why they did this was to have someone to talk to about Rhaena, to have her react to the disappointment of not being sent a dragon like she wanted, being sent a hatchling. Otherwise, which is why they didn't have her show her scene with Jace, because they would only see the agreement and not the sort of the contract, shenanigans that Rhaenyra basically played on her. That the reaction to that is more important than the setting of that up. So that's why they did this stuff with Rhaena. On the other hand, I don't love Rhaena's looking for the dragon. I'm cool with Rhaena being the writer of Sheepstealer. I don't love the loss of Nettles, but I kind of understand it. And given that we saw it coming so far away, that's a sign that it made sense from an adaptation perspective, even if we didn't love it. But I don't love the changing of the location to there. On the other hand, I don't know what else they could have done. If they need to show the scenes of Jane being mad about not getting a real size dragon, then how does that work? To have Rhaena have Sheepstealer early? That's the problem. So either way, they run into a conundrum. Either they have a problem with Sheepstealer being claimed too early, or they have a problem of who is Lady Jane going to express these problems to? Why aren't the troops marching? I guess they could just do that through ravens. But yeah, I do have some complaints about how they handled this part too, and not just the lack of Jessamine Redford, which by itself could have helped a lot. In the books, what we get is Joffrey staying there for a while, and then she eventually goes back to King's Landing because he's the heir. Once Jace dies, having him be up at the Vale makes less sense. So that might be how they do it as well. Like Joffrey maybe returns to the Vale or just doesn't go there at all because he goes to Pentos and then comes back to King's Landing. And that's when the princes are captured and Joffrey flies Taxis back to escapes and gets away to King's Landing. So he gets the Aegon Stormcloud plotline, basically. Maybe even including his dragon getting shot up. I'm not sure about that. But I think I think that we'll see Joffrey become more of a character next season. I don't think they'll recast him, but he's a young actor.
I know, another recasting.
Yeah, like, he got a lot older really fast. Yeah. They might pull that shenanigans. So the Dragon Keepers, I was very happy with that. George's version of them is not as interesting. Guys in armor that just guard the dragons. I think this is way cooler. Valyrian flavor.
I think it makes more sense.
Yeah, it does make more sense.
They need to have people to kind of manage them and take care. I think it does make more sense.
Well, it does make sense in some ways. On the other hand, like, where did they come from? You got to kind of. I think this version of them, we're going to assume that they have been carried over from Valyria. They've existed since Aenar the Exile brought them over, and they've existed since then.
That's what I would assume.
In the book, Jaehaerys created them, which is like they couldn't have that Valyrian flavor if they were created amongst Westerosi.
Yeah, so I think you're right that we have to assume that that their origin is entirely different, and that's what I assumed as well. I don't think we need to have it spelled out for us to just make that jump.
Yeah. We mourn the lack of the cannibal and the gray ghost in the show, but we saw it coming more than a mile away. Dragons cost so much money. These dragons are not plot heavy. They're barely in the plot at all. So, too bad, but gotta, of all the things to be disappointed in, well, this one's...
Don't say that to Cannibal the Dragon in our live stream chat.
Sorry, Cannibal the Dragon. You probably saw it coming too, though. Or saw it not coming. The Seeds were moved to King's Landing, which I didn't think was a huge change. Again, because of the efficiency of combining the unrest in King's Landing, combining that with the Dragon Seeds plot. I thought that was a pretty efficient way to do things.
I think it makes a lot of sense that the Targaryens would have fooled around in King's Landing where there are lots of brothels. Like, yeah, they also might have slept with, as I'm about to read, daughters of innkeeps and wives of fishermen, but it makes more sense for them to sleep with sex workers.
Yep, and it's mentioned, Mazzaria mentions that, yes, there's Seeds, King's Landing, and Dragonstone. So it's implied that the gathered group there were both.
Yeah.
Even though none of the main characters are from that group. But here is the quote from the book.
Even after the end of the rite of the first night, certain Targaryens continued to dally with the daughters of innkeeps and the wives of fishermen, so Seeds and the sons of Seeds were plentiful on Dragonstone. It was to them that Prince Jacaerys turned, at the urging of his fool, vowing that any man who could master a dragon would be granted lands and riches and dubbed a knight. His sons would be ennobled, his daughters wed to lords, and he himself would have the honor of fighting beside the Prince of Dragonstone against the pretender Aegon II Targaryen and his treasonous supporters. Not all those who came forward in answer to the prince's call were Seeds, nor even the sons or grandsons of Seeds.
That's an important little add-on there at the end. Not all those who came forward and answered the prince's call were Seeds, nor even the sons or grandsons of Seeds. That's super important. I'm not sure the show is going that direction, though. So far, they have not had anyone try that isn't a Seed or the son of a Seed or doesn't believe they are, like Ulf. Maybe Ulf isn't actually, but we can't say for sure he isn't, right? There's no one that we can go, okay, that person's definitely not a Dragon Seed. Because Stefan Darklin, this was a gray area in the book. He's listed as one of these. It's implied he's one of these people that isn't the Seed or grandson of a Seed. We, meaning the Westeros.org fandom, the people who posted on the boards back in the day, I was a part of this, way before even the first TV show. So before HBO's Game of Thrones was a thing, but well before House of the Dragon, there were theories that the Darklins had a Targaryen marriage. Because the Darklins are so tight with the Targaryens. They've had more Kingsguard than any other house by far. They've had 7. They actually goofed a little bit on the sigil. Good catch by Nina, who knows the sigils better than anybody else I know. She pointed out that, yes, they had the 7 Kingsguard, the 7 swords of the Kingsguard as part of their sigil for the Darklins here in House of the Dragon. Well, they haven't had 7 Kingsguard yet. There should only be 3 by this point. So there should only be 3 swords on that. That's 7. The 7 swords were added over time to denote the number of Darklins that served in the Kingsguard. Yeah, the 4 of them haven't happened yet. So that was a little bit of a chronology oopsie there. But talk about a small mistake. Pretty small. Takes someone like Nina to notice that. But worth pointing out. So in the show, the reason we think they're dispensing entirely with the idea that non-dragon seeds could ride dragons is the fact that they gave Stefan Darklin a Targaryen ancestor when the book did not. As I said, it was implied, it was a long-standing book reader theory before the shows even existed, but it's never confirmed. And so the show went ahead and confirmed it with this Princess Ariana Targaryen. I will complain about that.
Can I say, yeah. I just want to say, I'm just going to go on record. I want to just believe that Rhaenyra spoke out of turn when she said princess. She thinks of all Targaryen women as princesses, and it's just a lady. That's my explanation for it, and it makes me not be bothered.
That suits me fine. It's still a problem, though, because the timeline still doesn't work with that. That's not his grandmother's grandmother. It's too short. You need more time than that. You need substantially more time than that. They could have much easily just had it be a Baratheon ancestor. Have it be a Baratheon. Baratheons are all dragon seeds. Have a Baratheon Darklin marriage. It makes so much more sense than making up this Targaryen ancestor that they didn't frame very well.
I think they could have said you have Targaryen heritage.
Yes, exactly. The line it's just a small tweak to the writing could have fixed it. So it's not a big complaint because it's not a huge thing, but I'm complaining about it. And now we move on. Lord Massey was one of the Dragon Seeds, was one of the people who tried to mount a dragon in the book. Doesn't happen in the show. We kind of wanted him to die because that actor kind of sucks in real life.
Yeah, the character sucks and the actor both.
Yeah.
He was like making all those inappropriate statements at council about like Lyseni orgies and stuff. Which, like whatever. I'm not against making like comments like that, but read the room. Like you're like, there's like some young folks in the room. Like I don't know, it just didn't seem appropriate.
So they just dispense with that. Linda Massey is a character in the books, the one running around doing Myzaria's propaganda. She doesn't do that in the book, but she is with Rhaenyra from a very early age. She's the one that supposedly tears her own eyes out when Rhaenyra is eaten in front of her. So I don't think I want to see that. Let's not have Linda do that in the show. Let's have her react strongly, but not gouge her own eyes out, please. I don't think we need that. Thank you. Alan and Adam, right? So they're age flipped and doubled, meaning Adam is the younger one. Alan is the older one, whereas in the book it's the other way around, and they're much older. They're like, I think their age is roughly doubled, it seems like. Now,
yeah, roughly. Like he was 15 and now he's about 30.
Yeah. So in the book, Corlys has them legitimized, which could still happen. And in fact, I suspect it will. It just hasn't happened yet. Our guess is that Mouse dies. The Mouse is their mother, Marilda of Hull. She would not be poor. She had a ship and then inherited the shipyard. So that's a substantial change from her. They wouldn't have been growing up poor. So
I think she had to die a long time ago.
If she dies early, but then why didn't they inherit? Well, they're still her children. So like, she's clearly wasn't as wealthy, I think, unless some sort of, maybe they have to invent some sort of catastrophe. She lost her business. She lost her ship, something like that.
Yeah, because even if she died before they could provide for themselves, she would have had a little bit of a nest egg from being, she was a shipwright. She was, she owned
the ship building.
She not a shipwright. She was the owner of all of like a shipwright.
She sold
company.
it though. She did sell it and then buy a ship and just do her own thing. So we could say maybe she was lost at sea at some point. We could always just do that. That works for, there's a lot of ways you can imagine. We don't have to come up with specific ideas because it's wide open. But of course, the other change was Alan, no attempt at claiming Sheepstealer, which I don't know that they would have done it anyway, but it certainly couldn't have done that given Sheepstealer living in the Vale. By the way, more on that in a minute. So Adam chooses not chosen. That's a difference too. Adam, obviously we don't know from the book how he gets sea smoke. It just says Adam claims sea smoke. There's no description of the action there, but it's pretty explicit that he claimed sea smoke, not sea smoke claimed him, which is what happens in the show. I liked that change. I thought it was kind of cool. Maybe it does go a little outside of how George's dragons work in the books, but I thought it was neat. I wouldn't complain about that. I like Ulf having a little more backstory, a little more story. It's done the way I would have. It was done in a good way. Hugh, similar, I like making him Sarah's child. It was a very good choice there. I like that choice a lot. Doesn't change the book very much. We know Sarah had 3 kids. She sent them to the Great Council. So instead of sending them to the Great Council, this happens, which honestly makes a lot more sense. Like they had no shot at the Great Council. No one would ever have voted for them.
I think it's stated that I thought I remembered someone saying that she did send them to the Great Council and that they'd said it in some extra material, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I thought she had sent some of her sons to there, but
not in the show. I don't think so.
Okay. I'll
if you find, I could be wrong. If you find it, let me know, but I never saw anything like that. Hugh is now a blacksmith rather than a blacksmith's bastard, which is also not a huge change.
I really like this because it makes you think of Gendry, which is another royal bastard that is given a trade.
Yeah.
That's how you kind of get in sometimes, is that you have an in there, and because he was Sarah's son, he would be more likely to get a trade.
Yeah, I agree. George commented on the Dragon Bond during the season, saying there's going to be more to come about that in his books. Of course, we would expect more to come, but it's nice to see that. It still makes us hyped to hear that. So we will want to revisit some of this, perhaps, look at how it was done and see how it lines up. But I kind of don't understand his complaint about the dragon ranging. I do have my complaints about Sheepstealer going to the Vale, but I don't have big complaints about it. My complaints about it are how some of the other part of that plot was handled, but not the actual Sheepstealer being there. Because Sheepstealer being there, it's a little odd, but again, George had Silverwing go retire to Red Lake at the end of the dance. And no one ever seems to bother her. She just lives there at Red Lake and just dies there of old age eventually. Red Lake is really far away from Dragonstone, way farther away from Dragonstone than the Vale is from Dragonstone. And George also has Sheepstealer live with Nettles in a hidden corner out of the way for the rest of their lives. So it's not like Sheepstealer was uncomfortable living there. She doesn't move afterwards, right? Once Nettles dies, Sheepstealer still lives there. I doubt they died at the same time. Sheepstealer almost certainly outlived Nettles. So, again, not a huge change, and George may have slightly contradicted himself with that. So I'm not going to argue.
Yeah, I think it's so funny. Like the Red Lake thing. I'm like, literally in this conflict, one of the dragons goes elsewhere. George, what are you talking about? But yeah, that made me laugh.
As far as the claiming of dragons, they basically made Vermithor a combo of cannibal and Sheepstealer, because Sheepstealer is the one who kills the most seeds in the book, and Cannibal kills a few others, and Vermithor only kills like one or two, and Silverwing kills none. They kept that the same. So just for budget. Again, not a complaint, just pointing out the difference.
I think it makes sense for the Bronze Fury to be one of the ones to kill the most.
It's not a stretch at all. Yeah. Not a stretch at all. It was totally fine. So, Rhaena being Nettles, again, we've expressed disappointment at the lack of Nettles. We don't need to go back to that. But there's still so much coming in this plotline, so we'll have to reserve judgment on the rest of it. However, it does seem to answer the question of whether Nettles was Daemon's daughter in the book. We don't know that, but we know that how the show is going to do it. Yes, Rhaena is definitely Daemon's daughter, so that aspect fits really well. I doubt Daemon and Rhaena will become lovers. Blah. Please no. Yeah, I don't think they'll do that. It'll be daughterly, fatherly, and we'll see how that goes. But will this be a means for Rhaenyra to lose trust in one or both of them because of the not protecting the children like she's supposed to? It also has a potential to change Baela and Rhaena's dynamic in a way that's not in the book. Baela isn't that different from her book character yet. And I'm not saying she will be, but I'm just saying it could happen. Moondancer is different. So Moondancer is larger, and the fact that she's able to scout and participate more does change things. It's possible she'll participate in the Battle of the Gullet. All season long, we were wondering about this moment where it was in the trailers where she's screaming, and it was like, oh wow, maybe she's in the Battle of Rook's Rest or in the Battle of the Gullet. Well, A, she's not in the Battle of Rook's Rest. B, the Battle of the Gullet didn't happen this season as we kind of predicted. Well, not kind of. I was pretty dead set on that until around episode 4 or 5, and then I started saying, nope, it's not going to happen, and that turned out to be true. So yeah, I'm really wondering if Sheepstealer, if Rhaena and Baela's dynamic changes and we get some scenes of them talking, and whether, Rhaena acts more superior now. It's like, I'm the one with the big dragon now, Yeah, but your dragon's ugly. No, I don't think it'll be that competitive, but it will be a change to their dynamic. And it could be that competitive. Rook's Rest. Ultimately, the action wasn't changed that much. It was changed somewhat, but not in a way that changes the ultimate outcomes all that much. A big difference was Aegon being part of the trap rather than a party crasher, a drunk party crasher. Which I kind of imagine that's what happened in the book anyway. That Cole didn't want Aegon there. Like, why would we risk the king in battle like this? But Aegon forced it. He's like, no, I'm the king. I decide. I'm going. They just weren't able to talk him out of it. Kind of like here, they weren't able to talk him out of it either. He still went. they thought they talked him out of it, and he got drunk and flew off. So, yeah. Ultimately, the end result is also very similar. He is harmed badly. Aemon gets blamed for it a bit. That's not as implied in the book, however. Even though it should have been. I always thought it looked like Aemon. I always thought Aemon looked guilty there, But people don't talk about that in the book. It isn't really expressed. The line that he sleeps 9 hours out of every 10 is taken straight from the book. His injuries are very similar. The context, the type of injuries, the recovery is maybe a little bit faster, but not a big change. It's just all that. The point of that maybe is just to get him out of King's Landing slightly faster, and to have scenes of him walking with a cane, which I think is the intent is there to show the audience how much he is like his father, which he didn't want to be, and that's not in the book. So I like that as a really good character building thing for Aegon. tying him to his father and kind of paying off stuff that they built up in season 1. Aemond taking control is very supported by Kristen Cole in the book. It kind of just happens in the show. He kind of goes along with it in the show. He's like, yeah, Aemond, yeah. Makes sense. He doesn't like it, but he does it. So, again, not a huge change, but there's a lot more nuance added to it in the show. It's more like Cole's like, well, you got to be in charge now. Your brother's out of it. Time for you to take over. He's like, yes, I will. I'm ready. I can't wait to fight, So that's kind of similar. A big possible difference is Sunfire. We've talked about it before. We don't need to rehash it. They say Sunfire's dead. We're hoping that's just a trick. If not, I don't know how they're going to handle it, but if Sunfire is dead, it definitely changes Moondancer's outcome, because Moondancer's death is to Sunfire. So if Sunfire's already dead, then the character who leads the attack on Sunfire in the book is in the show. We've seen Wally Smooten. That's the guy that leads the attack on the injured Sunfire and dies doing it. So, and thus avoids having to be the man to make the tough decision at Maidenpool later when Rhaenyra says, hey, go ahead and kill Nettles and let Daemon live. Yikes. Yeah, Wallace is dead by that point in the book. He may not be in the show because maybe there's no Sunfire to kill him. We'll see. Questions. Scott of Greywater Watch says, Jaehaera being the heir as female is a big difference. Yeah, but it's a potential difference. But that happens in the book too. Maelor is dead before Aegon, and Aemon dies. So it isn't brought up in the book. That's why it's not a big change. Because yes, it should be, but it's not a big deal in the book. So it's not a big change. Maybe it should be a big deal in the show too. Maybe the show should address that. But the fact that the book doesn't really means to me that they're just doing what the book did. Aemon took over, and no one wants to talk about who the heir is while Aemon's around. No one wants to act like they're stepping on his foot, especially with Aemon being more aggressive. Show Aemon being more aggressive in taking over. So that's one thing the lack of Maelor does, is allows Aemon to be a little more aggressive towards Aegon. Although he might be able to do that anyway, because what's he worried about, some 2-year-old sealing his claim? Not when he's domineering the way he has been. So I don't know. I don't know that I agree it's a huge difference. I thought it would be, but comparing it to the book, it's not. Like, they never made a big deal out of Maelor or Jaehaera during the war. It's the kind of thing that you settle after the war. Dornish Dame says, can I also say that I found the parallel they drew between Balon the Brave and Book Tywin cool? The widower who says he will take no other woman but spends time with sex workers. Yeah. I do like that.
Whether you believe that or not, I mean, I think we could believe that Balon would do that. I am still very suspicious. I think Ulf is a dragon seed, but I think he's a generation or two removed and not actually a son of Balon. That's just what I think based on his reticence to go and having to be, kind of convinced by his friends.
Well, if he's not Balon's child, he can't be a generation or two. He's too old.
No, that's my point. Is I think he is a generation or two from a Targaryen of some
other
mystery.
One. Okay.
He has no idea that he was faking something that he actually is. That's
okay.
My interpretation. I think you could see that scene and say, "Oh, he really is Balon's son. He's just a coward and was scared." Valid interpretation. I like the idea more that this is our ambiguous dragon seed and that he doesn't know that he has Targaryen blood.
Right
really.
on. Either way, it sets up a possible good parallel that Dornish Dame says here. Yes, Tywin also refused to remarry after Joanna, but clearly visited sex workers on the sly. And yeah, it would fit for Balon to do that. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of Balon seeing sex workers. Come on, y'all. Take no other woman doesn't mean never sleep with another woman. It means have no other relationship, have no other marriage, no other wife. That doesn't mean you never just go have a little fun on the side.
Yeah,
they're not the same things.
Yeah, I like the idea that Balon did sleep with women after his wife died, but I still don't like the idea that Balon is Ulf's father because I just want an ambiguous dragon seed.
Gotcha. Battle of the Gullet / Triarchy setup. In the book, it is Otto's letters that sets it up, and takes a little while to get going. Not Tylan's visit. But, of course, Otto's fired a little earlier in the show, so it's not a big change here. And it's fun to use Tylan because, well, he is the master of ships, so it makes sense. But also, There's other involvement with Thailand and the Triarchy later, which I had forgotten about. So let's get into that. First, though, here is the quote from the book on how this got set up.
Sir Otto sent word to the Magisters, promising exclusive trading rights at King's Landing if they would clear the gullet of the Sea Snake's ships and open the sea lanes once again. To add savor to the stew, he also promised to cede the stepstones to the 3 daughters, though, in truth, the Iron Throne had never claimed those isles. The Triarchy was never quick to move, however. Lacking a true king, all important decisions in this 3-headed kingdom were decided by the High Council. 11 magisters from each city made up its membership, every man of them intent on demonstrating his own sagacity, shrewdness, and importance, and winning every possible advantage for his own city.
So here they went with 1 representative from each city instead of 11, and had them fairly agreeable with each other. They kind of all wanted the same thing. They want the stepstones, right? And that is a difference. Like it says here, the stepstones were never claimed by the 7 kingdoms in the books, but Corlys Velaryon has claimed them. So in the show here, so not a huge difference. In the books, there's a series of different kings of the stepstones that rule them throughout this era, and you can check out our episode on the stepstones to get detail on that. It includes characters like Ricalio Rendoon and the Red Kraken, and fun characters that we might not see much of or at all in the show, but we get echoes of them and talk about them. Yeah, remember Ricalio Rendoon was mentioned by Laenor in season 1. He's like, there's a man who fights with a sword in each hand and wears a woman's frock, a purple bearded man. And Rhaenyra laughs at that. And we all recognize that as Ricalio Rendoon at the time. And now Ricalio's story has been given over in part to Shirako Lohar. Not that Shirako Lohar isn't already a book character. They are, but changed somewhat. And I'm not just talking about the gender flipping, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was curious if whether we think in retrospect that statement was about Shirako or whether it was in fact about Ricalio. Because like a game of telephone, like things as they
No, he
spread.
said purple beard.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so there's no beard. I don't think
Yeah,
that can't work.
Good.
Yeah.
So I have hope that we will still see Ricalio. I would love that. I would like us to see multiple genderqueer pirates. That makes me happy.
I'm pretty sure he said purple beard. I'm not positive about that.
Okay, I know the dressed in women's clothes part of it,
Yes.
and which, again, if rumors are spreading,
Shirako wasn't wearing women's clothes, though.
Yeah. That's
Shirako
my
was
point.
wearing man's
If,
clothes.
my point was that if rumors are spread,
Yes.
you have to take everything with a grain of salt when they're talking about someone being like this genderqueer pirate that they just got their wires crossed,
Right.
and that this was Shirako. But I certainly prefer us getting both Shirako and Ricalio. Like, I would like to just see that this is a culture where there are many people who play with gender in that way. Like, that's more fun than just one. Yeah.
So it's Alan Velaryon, well after the Dance of the Dragons, not well after, during the aftermath, who has to sail all the way around to fight the Red Kraken. He has to sail all the way from Driftmark to the Iron Isles, which is a perilous journey, and to get through the Stepstones, he has to get permission from Ricalio Rendoon, and that's when the following things all happen that we saw Tywin Lannister do. Ricalio is like, I need you to sleep with my wives. I want strong sons from them, which is exactly what Lohar says. And he has to mud wrestle him, which in front of his captains, which is exactly what Tywin has to do in front with Shirako. So that's all very fun. And, slight changes moved around. Of course, the difference here is how quickly they get going. And it's like, it takes them forever to decide. 11 magisters. Each one has to demonstrate his own sagacity, shrewdness, and importance, et cetera, et cetera. But in the book and here in the show, they're like, yep, let's go. We're ready. Once you do these 3 things, you got to wrestle, you got to bang my wives, you got to agree to the stepstones. Yeah, boom, that's it. Let's go tomorrow.
I think they play up their hatred of the sea snake a little more here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're ready to fight him. And they also bring up several of these other points. They say, look, we don't need your exclusive trading rights. We can trade wherever we want. We got the whole of Essos. It's huge. Like one city. You need us more than we need you. I thought that was good dialogue because it's true. That's pretty much that is the simplest way to put it, and it's accurate. Yeah, you need us more than we need you. But we do want to get involved because we want the stepstones. So, yeah. So it was good negotiating, and they kept it efficient and quick. And yeah, the book version makes sense that it's more drawn out. But I don't complain when they shorten things because otherwise it means multiple scenes, multiple this and that. Yeah, this was good. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting in terms of a long-term setup. In episode 3, I think it was episode 3 of season 1, it's mentioned that the Triarchy captured Johanna Swan, who is kind of a Sarah Targaryen type character in that she ends up in a brothel and ends up dominating, just rises to the top and ends up being queen in all but name of the city of Lys. And in the book version, Shirako Lohar is killed fighting over Johanna Swan's affections, which technically that could still happen.
Yeah, that seems to stand up. Like, Shirako has wives. Shirako could conceivably be real into Johanna and seems like the type to fight over affection. Like, all of this seems like something that could happen.
Yeah, it's definitely there. The setup is there. It could absolutely happen. And Shirako, you could see why they just continue to be a character, why they wouldn't just cut her out of the show entirely, because Shirako is going to be the one that, if they stick to the book, will be the one to have Aegon and Viserys in captivity. Well, Viserys in captivity.
I really like that idea. Like the thinking about Shirako with these little Targaryen princelings, is kind of a fun idea to think about that.
It might be both in the book, in the show. In the book, Aegon flies away, but we don't think that'll happen because this actor is just too young and the dragon's too small.
Yeah. There's other ways to separate those kids, technically. But,
sure.
But, if you want them separate, they can be separate. If you want them together, they could be together.
Yeah.
Also, it's notable that if we get Johanna Westerling, Lannister, then we would get 2 Johannas introduced in like a season.
The Johanna of the East and the Johanna of the West.
Yeah.
So one other thing that's not really mentioned in the show that what Otto was doing was hiring sellswords. He was trying to boost their army, and presumably that's where guys like Black Trombo come from, and Black Trombo is the one who is credited with one of the versions of killing Daeron. Credited with. There's 3 different versions of how Daeron the Daring dies, and one of them is Black Trombo kills him. So I think Black Trombo is also credited with the Butcher's Ball. The setup for that. It's suggested he might have been. I don't think it's clear. So Black Trombo would be a sellsword fighting for the Black faction, but in the book both sides hire sellswords. Now in the book, after Aegon II returns to the throne, he sends Tyland overseas to hire ships and sellswords from Pentos, Tyrosh, and Myr. So it's kind of like what he's doing right now. But while he's doing it in the book, Aegon II is poisoned. So he comes back over and is like, can I still be on the council, y'all? And the answer is actually yes, he can be. But only after he's brutally tortured. Brutally tortured and maimed. After the war, after his maiming, he's the hooded hand, right? Tyland is, and Braavos, Pentos, and Lorath all get into an alliance and try to get Westeros to join, and Tyland is against it. And as Hand of the King, he has say-so and keeps them out of it.
I'm really excited to see Tyland's arc there, I have to say.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, he's going to have a physical transformation.
He does not come off as a really important character, but he is.
But he is. Yeah. I'm quite excited for that, especially because it makes you think of parallels to current day Lannisters, like Jaime specifically with maimings and dealing with being physically incapacitated in some way. Anyways, I find that it resonates with me in terms of things that the Lannisters have to battle with.
Right on. Rhaenyra. Biggest changes to her came last season, just the change to her basic personality and a few other things along those lines. And the prophecy. That's huge. The prophecy bit. One of the ways I like to frame the prophecy is that it's kind of an admission by the showrunners that George just made the blacks a lot more favorable. Everybody likes the blacks more for the most part. Like, obviously not everybody, but like if you're looking at the whole, it's like an 80-20 split at best. It's kind of like the Brackens and Blackwoods. Like everybody favors the Blackwoods for the most part. It's similar. So why not just go a little farther in that direction and have the blacks be the stewards of the prophecy? So that seems to be like a pretty strong clue as to which side, you should root for, because if you want the prophecy to be carried forward and the realm to survive. And I say should in quotes because obviously you root for whoever you want. You root for your characters you like the most. for whatever reasons you want. It's entertainment. But Rhaenyra was sidelined a lot in this portion of the book. In the show, if they had carried it over, she would have done like her first 2 episodes where she had one line in the first episode and then a lot more grief the next episode. That would have carried over more than 2 episodes. It would have been like half the season, if not more. Like she still isn't guiding things after the Battle of Rook's Rest even. She doesn't really return to council and making decisions until after Jace's death in the book. Most of the things she does in the show are done by Jace. Jace does so much of the Dragonseed stuff. He does the naming of Corlys's hand. It's his plan of attack to take King's Landing. He's the one who conceives that and, of course, doesn't get to carry it out. So a lot of that stuff was given from Jace to Rhaenyra to make her even more central rather than having her be sidelined. So the difference being that in the book, the council's not waiting on her. The council's not like, why not? Rhaenyra needs to take action. We need her to do stuff because Jace is doing all that. So that's part of the change there. But as we've said many times, especially towards the end of the season, it really looks like Rhaenyra is turning into a version of what we maybe would have expected before the show started. A darker, more paranoid, more ends justify the means. Someone who's a lot more like Stannis. Someone who's like, yeah, I'm the king. The law says I'm the king. And I'm the carrier of this prophecy. So I must win for humanity to survive. So anything I do in the name of that goal is acceptable because all of humanity is at stake here. What's sacrificing some babies or killing some peasants? What's a few dragons next to all of humanity? She can excuse almost anything. And she hasn't really gotten to that point yet, but we've seen the start of it. That, like as Shea said, let's burn Lannisport and Old Town. We got to do what we got to do. And Jace backing her up on that. And wanting to be feared is a little more, is a part of that doesn't necessarily come out of the book, but fits with how women are perceived in book and show of Westeros. The men don't take her seriously. They laugh at her and scorn her advice and denigrate her until she blows up and slaps Lord Celtigar and decides that she wants to be more feared from that moment forward. And we've barely begun to see that yet. And a lot of that comes from Mysaria. Mysaria is the one that empowers her to be more dangerous, shows her how to be more dangerous, shows her how to be more threatening, enables her to do subterfuge and intrigues that she didn't have before. And of course, I love the porting over of Mushroom's character of all things to be Mysaria. There's multiple angles that Mysaria is Mushroom. One of them is the Dragonseed's idea, right? According to Mushroom was the first one to suggest bastards and, wherever you Targaryens spilled your silver seed. That line came from Mushroom from the book. Lady Gwyn predicted that one. Good call, Lady Gwyn. But not only could Mysaria's issues have, as we've discussed with Rhaenyra, could come up and their divergence on their goals, but Mushroom claims to be Rhaenyra's number one confidant, the only one person that she could really trust in her darkest hours, which we're seeing Mysaria be that role in the show. Here's the quote from Fire and Blood from Mushroom.
Only I could lighten her grace's heart, Mushroom claims in his testimony. In this dark hour, I became the queen's counselor, setting aside my fool's scepter and pointed hat to lend her all my wisdom and compassion. Unbeknownst to all, it was the jester who ruled them now, an invisible king in motley.
Right? Like, that's what we perceive a possible and perhaps likely outcome for Mysaria's role in Rhaenyra's court in the long run, is that someone who wields a lot more power than it seems like, someone who's in Rhaenyra's ear a lot, someone whose decisions are hidden because they seem like they're coming from Rhaenyra, but they're actually suggestions of Mysaria. And I think the show is going to go darker with it because Mushroom's suggestions aren't going to be, burn Lannisport, burn Old Town. And Mysaria's grudge against the Hightowers is not in the book. They don't burn her business. They don't burn her establishment in the show or in the book. So she is a lot more pointed at them as an enemy, whereas in the book version of her is a little more just kind of out for herself and doesn't have specific grudges necessarily. She just has specific allies, and that's Daemon and Rhaenyra. And as we've said before, the relationship between Mysaria and Rhaenyra is suggested in the book. Not spelled out, but pretty suggested. And so is Rhaenyra's bisexuality. That is more explicit, even if we don't have a specific scene of it. So yeah, Jace. Jace is a big character. He's probably one of the very few characters that can be said to have his role lessened from the book. Maybe the only one on the Black side. Because their stories are either expanded or fleshed out more. But Jace's might actually be smaller. Not that it's small, but it's smaller. Including him in the prophecy made sense. That was good. We liked seeing that. They preserved him as the guy who had the original idea for the dragon seeds. That's also from the book. In the book, he doesn't turn against it when it involves commoners. He's still all for it. So that's a bit of a change. But I like that. I like that. I mean, it isn't necessary, but I thought it was smart. It creates a little more. It creates reason for him to take risks at the Battle of the Gullet, which is what apparently happens. He flies too low, and that's what gets him shot down. So he wants to shine amongst the bigger dragons that are now on their side, the ones that are also bastards. So it gives him a compelling reason to try to stand out above them, and that's what's going to get him killed. So it's tragic, but it does fit. Again, Jace is the one who brings Corlys in his hand in the book. He's the one who sends Joffrey to the Vale. He's the one who sends Aegon and Viserys and the Gay Abandon. His death is foreshadowed in, what was that, episode 3 or 4? I forget, when Bela's got her crossbow and she's just shooting at this kind of weird wooden structure that Jace passes through, which he's going to be hanging to a piece of driftwood when he gets shot, if it's at all similar to the book version. So yeah, lots of changes there.
You know, regarding Bela and Jace, I go back and forth between, like, I'm kind of dissatisfied with their relationship and that I feel that they don't really seem like betrothed. They look like adult enough that they should just be married at this point. It's just a kind of a weird vibe in general. But I think it's not, I tend to think some of that's deliberate, because if I was raised with my betrothed as like they were children raised together, I would probably treat her more like my sister, and you probably wouldn't see us making out a bunch. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, I think
it's rare that happens. Yeah,
it makes sense that they are not in love. They have a familial relationship with one another, and it's not a romance.
It's also just straight from the book. They could have had this line from the book. They opted not to, but Jace is like, I don't want to get married till after the war. So they just carry that over. Like, so that's just, that would be a change to have them develop a bit more.
I would like to, if they talked about it, if he
Sure.
had expressed that sentiment, you know, it maybe would answer some of that for us, because I think a lot of people do look at these two, and then they look at Aegon and Helena, and it just seems like, well, why aren't they also married? And I think if he had expressed that, it would help. And yeah,
Aegon and Helena don't have that warmth either. It makes
Yeah.
sense. Like they have an understanding.
But it also leads me to where I feel like they've set it up so well for Bela to actually care about Alan. That is who she's
Yeah.
going to get with. And,
Yeah.
like, she's not in love with Jace. She's going to be very sad to lose what was her brother, you know, her stepbrother. But I think she has room to actually have a romance.
I agree. Daemon and Harrenhal, book version, much simplified. No dreams, little to do with Alice, right? The quote is, whatever her powers, it would seem Daemon Targaryen was immune to them. That's the book version, of course. Yeah, it would seem. But if he wasn't, Fire and Blood would not be able to tell us otherwise. Alice Rivers, by far, is the character that it wouldn't make sense to fully explore her in Fire and Blood, given the presentation of that book. Why would the Maesters know about her magical abilities, other than the stuff that's really blatant and everybody says happened? Other than the stuff there's lots of witnesses for, which mostly there won't be. And they're also just, they downplay magic. We've known that about the Citadel for a while. So I liked this. Again, we're not going to get too deep into this because I have set aside time to do a Daemon episode, and I want to cover a lot of it there. But there are some things outside Daemon's story that happen that are relevant here for us today. I liked Simon's expansion on that. I like, just so many of the fandom loved Simon Strong. Great actor, great performance.
It's so painful.
It is going to be really painful. I thought it would happen this season. Like, I really thought, because of, they would only have him
casting.
for one season, and casting, that probably was their plan. But now he's going to be in season 2 briefly. So
Season 3.
3, yes, excuse me. And I liked his rejection of Larius. I thought that was a really good added scene that explains the difference there. It's like not really talked about in the book. The dampness thing versus fire, I loved that explanation because, yeah, it would make sense that place is damp, and it would make sense that fires are strange. And that helps bolster the place's reputation as a place with mysterious fires. Why would there be fires here? It's damp as hell, yet there was. And we saw from last season that it was done by Laris's firebug, his firefly. So, yes, it was engineered, and yes, that makes sense. So I like that a lot. Alice Rivers comes straight out and says, you will die in this place. True, unless they make a huge change. And then at the end, I guess they were kind of doing some bookending by having that be pretty early in the season. It was episode 3. And then in episode 8, Helena tells Aemon that he's going to die in the God's Eye. So both of their deaths in the God's Eye are pretty well set up, foreshadowed, whatever. Now, when Daemon sits down at dinner the first time, he's like, he's not eating, and they're like, don't you want to eat? You know, that's some good food there. And he's like, well, poison's an easy way to kill a dragon rider. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Ulf White, who will later die to poison. And Aegon II will also die to poison. Technically, he won't be a dragon rider at that point, though. He will be dragonless. But it will still be the thing that kills him, most likely. I like the if you build it, they will come business there, because showing all the wooden structures get built is going to be awful tragic when Vhagar burns them all. I loved the additional clarity on Daemon and Aemon's mirroring, because they are very mirrored. In the book, their similarities are all over the place, but they aren't explicitly presented. No one's ever like, you see how similar these two are? It isn't explicit. It's just all over the place in the subtext and the nuance and the details. Anyone who's spent a lot of time on it will have noticed that. But not necessarily casual show viewers, not necessarily people who've read Fire and Blood once, people who don't listen to a lot of podcasts or whatever. You might have missed it.
And I think a lot of times the parallel is the wrong word in some ways, because they're counterpoints. Mirrors is the right word that you used. You know what I mean? That they are the other half. You know, like some things they are just straightforward parallels.
Yeah.
But some things are just like the inverse of one another.
Mirroring rather than paralleling. Yeah. Yeah. And the mirroring that's part of what I wanted to present it as. Yeah. Some of they're the same. Some of them is their opposites, or some of them like, oh, this was me at a younger age. You know, Daemon seeing himself that way. And it is kind of one-sided that way, because Aemond isn't seeing himself as Daemon, but Daemon is seeing himself as Aemond, which makes sense, because Daemon is the older, more experienced one who sees the younger version of himself, where why would Aemond see the younger version? Why would he see himself as the older one? He might, but
I think there's
it's
an
less
element
likely to
of
see
him,
that.
When he was even younger, he would have admired Daemon. Like,
Yes.
I'm picturing Leo Ashton Aemon when he was a young boy. He would have seen Daemon Targaryen and maybe had some streak of wanting to be that kind of man.
Well, what I mean, I agree with you. What I mean is that it's not presented from Aemon's perspective. You don't see, Aemon's scenes don't show you the parallels to Daemon nearly as much as Daemon's scenes show you the parallels and mirroring to Aemon. That's kind of what I was getting at. The Godswood has changed a bit. Obviously, the Godswood in the book is massive, so they had to shrink it down a little bit just to fit it and all that. I love the addition of the roots going throughout the castle, which is a great way to explain the presence of weird dreams for people there. I thought that was very well set up. It used George's existing lore quite well to set that up.
They doubled down on it, because they were like, well, let's have it through the walls and in his bed.
Yeah,
Like,
and his
extra
bed, yeah.
reason.
I like that, yeah. And the bed was set up pretty well, too, because of Theon's bed. Or Eddard Stark's bed that Theon was sleeping in, when he had, by far, his most vivid dream, which made us all kind of think, well, is this what's going on here? Is this a werewood bed? Why is Theon of all the times? He never has any other dream like it again or before it, but it stands out. So Alice herself is pretty similar character-wise. A lot of her actions are show only. It's interesting that she's helping Daemon at all in the first place. It isn't explicit that she helps Daemon in the book. It's just that she just doesn't harm him.
Well, to me, what is help in the grand scheme of things when everything she's doing will lead to him dying a relatively premature death? You know what I mean?
But still, she's still helping him get his army together and win the River Lords. That's the part I'm like, how that does somehow lead to his eventual death, but it's still interesting that to get to that point, she has to help him with the conquest and all these other things.
My point is, I see it as she is helping the Team Black side, as it were. She's helping Rhaenyra get this army together, and she knows Daemon and Aemond will both die and just like be wiped out.
She knows that they are the ones that have the prophecy.
Yeah. So like, I to me, it's not as much about helping Daemon specifically as it is about helping assure the outcome that she wants to make sure happens.
I agree, but it's still interesting that what I'm saying is that this path that she has to take to get there, it's interesting that she has to help Daemon form an army in order to give that to Rhaenyra, in order to take King's Landing, in order to engineer Daemon's death at the God's Eye.
Well, yeah,
it's hard to see those as this. It's hard. That's what I'm saying. Those steps are unusual to get to that point.
The even more unusual part there is that then siding with Aemond and like manipulating Aemond and sleeping with him and having a seeming child. Like there's a lot.
That's what I'm saying. Like that,
confusing.
it's hard to perceive how these things all connect. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm using the word interesting very generically. It's more like hard to perceive. Certain aspects of it are not. Like her end game, getting Aemond and Daemon to die in the God's Eye, which is something we'll discuss next week with Joe Magician. It seems to be her end goal. But why and why certain steps are necessary to get to that part, that's the thing that it's sometimes hard to perceive. There's definitely some Bloodraven Bran energy in here, besides actually seeing Bloodraven later. Just the phrases like whispers on the wind and the way that Bloodraven encourages Bran to see things in his dreams and pushes certain angles and aspects and seems to be a part of them. You see that with Alice Rivers too, and she seems to have an idea, not just that he's having dreams, but she brings up his mother right after he has the dream about his mother. Like, she seems to have information about some specifics that are happening within his dream, which is where the Bloodraven energy comes from, because obviously Bloodraven is seeing things in Bran's dreams to a certain extent. Not everything, but some things. Making her pretty explicitly a skin changer, not in the book, but pretty slam dunk, I think, when that idea appeared with the owl and saying, I'm a bar now. We're like, ooh, yeah, of course she's a skin changer. Like, yeah, that fits perfectly. Like something not in the book that you would absolutely expect.
There are more skin changers than just the Starks in the main series. Magic is conceivably at a much higher point, right? In House of the Dragon. So you would expect that there are just as many and more skin changers throughout the lands in House of the Dragon than in A Song of Ice and Fire, if you actually think there's a correlation in dragons and magic, right? And that's certainly what Ryan Condal has said. In an interview, he said, if you extrapolate from them saying that the return of the dragons has led to this resurgence of even more magic, then there should be more magic in the world during House of the Dragon.
Or at least certain types of magic.
Yeah, certain types.
Maybe, which would be more total as well. It still makes your statement correct. And of course, they're in a very magical area around the God's Eye and all that too. So one change was Larys's removal of Harrenhal's wealth. That was a change from the book, because it specifically says when Daemon captures Harrenhal, he captures their not inconsiderable treasury. Whereas Larys specifically moved the wealth of Harrenhal to the Iron Bank of Braavos. So I don't know why that is a plot point, but I don't think it's random. I think they did that for a purpose, so we'll see about that. Aegon's rage over the taking of Harrenhal is very similar, book and show. He gets just flustered and paranoid and drinks more and just demanding, just like, take it back now. I want that. Very similar. There's the pressure of how Daemon gets the Riverlords on his side. In the book, it's so simple. He just puts out the call, and the small folk join him because they all are eager to fight for Rhaenyra. And that by itself pressures the lords to join, because they're like, oh, we can't, what are we going to be sidelined here and be left out? And yeah. Now, when the Blacks take King's Landing in the book, Adam doesn't land. He's ordered to stay aloft on sea smoke just in case something goes wrong, which is exactly what happens when Rhaenyra goes to Harrenhal to confront Daemon. And of course, when Alfred and Daemon have their conversation at the Godswood, it's set up to say that line, traitor, like the whisper from beyond, which is Bran or Bloodraven or something like that. One word, can't tell who the voice is. But it's to show watchers, I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's a traitor. He's trying to get Daemon to turn on Rhaenyra. But that's, unfortunately, there's a lot more treason coming from Sir Alfred. He's the main reason Rhaenyra dies, I suppose, other than Aegon and Larys. So we're going to have to find out why he turns on her. What is it that makes him turn? He's set up as someone that really hates the Hightowers. However, we're not told why. Why does he hate the Hightowers so much? What is it that makes him hate the Hightowers? Without a reason, that reason maybe isn't as strong as it seems. But so we'll see about that.
Yeah, it's all well and good to just declare that over and over, but unless you're like, the Hightowers killed my parents, I'm not going to really believe you.
Rhaenyra said it first. She's like, I know you'll never turn on them, but why?
Yeah, why? I kind of thought that was the kind of thing, to me, she said that to him specifically as a way to make him like, to sweeten him. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of thing you say to someone that you're like, I'm not doubting you. I'm sending you off to go do this thing and like putting on honors on you. And I trust you this much, when really she didn't trust him that much. And she sent him off just to get rid of him.
Yep. I agree with that. So there were some small differences in Bloodraven, mostly just his appearance though.
This is the thing. Okay, so like, I know in our last episode when I spoke about it, I said that the reason they didn't have his missing eye was because they wanted to be consistent with Game of Thrones. Well, I should throw all that out the window. He doesn't even have the birthmark in a Game of Thrones. They already aren't consistent. So like, it didn't really matter. Like, they can do whatever reason they want, but I don't think consistency is really my argument anymore, because he's not consistent. Yeah,
I agree. I think they should have just gone ahead and had him be one-eyed. But I also wouldn't say it's a big difference. It just, all it does is it takes out his Odin vibes, which is, that's fun to have that. It's too bad to not have that, but it's not a big difference. And it gets rid of the song, A Thousand Eyes in One, which the original show weirdly still used that line, even though he didn't have one eye. So strange. Anyway, but changing his eyes that doesn't change much. Like, his appearance is cool, but ultimately it's what he does and his character overall rather than his appearance that matters. And that, so far, well, they haven't touched it. We'll see. That's going to come. We'll see. The changes to Bloodraven's character, if they come, will happen in the Dunk and Egg show, not here in House of the Dragon. So there's not a whole lot to say on that.
It's the same actor.
Yeah, me too.
That's my question here, but we'll see.
With Daemon's dreams, one thing that's different that we haven't seen is the whole concept of missing time and just waking up and being like, I don't know where I'm at. That isn't something we've seen in the books that I can recall. So that's a bit of a change. I kind of liked it, but I can understand if people didn't, because it's so different and a little jarring, and it isn't exactly taken from George's material. Not that he's very straightforward with this stuff. George wants all the magic to be mysterious and unexplained, which allows them to play with it a little more, but also you can go too far with that, which maybe they did with the missing time stuff, but I didn't dislike it. Alyssa's look, we talked about that at the time too. His mother, her book version, she's got a broken nose and different colored eyes. He didn't know her. I think he would have heard that she had different colored eyes, but again, he doesn't know who that is until he's told later. So
yeah, I think it's an idealized dream vision version.
I would have preferred her to look like the book character. So I'm going to criticize it a little bit, but I don't think it's a big deal that they changed it because of that explanation.
Yeah, exactly. We can have a preference, but still be like, it's not a plot hole to us.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, not a plot hole.
It's not a plot hole. We just would have preferred to see the canonical Alyssa, who is just more. It's more interesting to see that than just like idealized what we were calling her generic Targaryen.
It seemed like a pointless change to make her look like that. Make her look like her book version. Like, why did you change her? Why not have her look her book version for that? Why not? What's the difference?
I mean, I see the reasons why, and it's again because they wanted to. It's either because they wanted to show that Daemon has this idealized version of his mother, or it's that they wanted it to translate to book. I mean to show.
Why is it idealized?
Or that they wanted it to translate to show only people this is Daemon's mom, and like she looks like a Targaryen.
Well, you can still have her look like a Targaryen and still carry all that. Like, I can understand like removing the broken nose to have a view of her that's more idealized, but why change her eyes? That's not idealized.
Yeah. I mean, fair enough. But yeah, in the book, she doesn't even have silver hair. She has like a dirty blonde hair.
Sure, but that's not that different. Like, if just lighting and, having the hair one way. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much to say here. Let's move on. Green Man. I loved seeing the Green Man. That was really, really cool. Some people were confused and thought it was like a Baratheon reference, which I don't think so, but that's cool. It's a cool interpretation. I was very happy to see the Green Man. The Isle of Faces is right there. I thought that was cool. Obviously, that's not a book thing. Like, why would they mention the the Green Man in the book? Well, they do mention them actually. Not as a real thing as a legend that maybe he talked to them.
Yeah, Adam goes there. So
yeah. I kind of doubt he will in the show, but I would love it if he does. Burning Mill, the Bracken Blackwood stuff. Different setup, relatively similar result. We'll probably still get Black Alley. We've heard Bloody Ben's name dropped already, and we might get Red Rob Rivers. That one's the least likely of the three by far. Sir Willem was show only, but his crimes are not. The stuff about burning the Septs and just attacking the Brackens was in the book. It's a little more set up from the book because it's explicit that the Brackens side with the Greens and the Blacks and the Blackwoods are for Rhaenyra right away. But there were some other small changes there. Sir Amos is made Lord Amos. Sir Raylan Rivers is made Raylan Bracken, made Amos's son. Those are small changes. I'm not sure that was necessary, but I think they just wanted to simplify it because the Lord is an older guy and Amos is the warrior. So they just wanted to simplify that, I guess. We're used to that kind of change. I never like it, but I always understand it. The same thing with Sir Willem was very simple. They used this character, this non-book character, to cover this part of the plot and then executed him, and he's cleanly out of the picture. Yeah, it worked pretty well. It was a pretty smooth way to do it, honestly. And we have a standalone episode on other book show changes here, so we'll leave this for now to save time. Check out our episode called The First Battle of the Dance of the Dragons. It's about the Battle of the Burning Mill, and it details some more differences between book and show in that. The phrase were changed a little bit, but in a way that is kind of gets you to the same point, just like a lot of these book show things. They change the how-to, but end up in the same spot. Because in the book, the phrase, there's no Jace negotiating with the phrase thing. They just come along with all the other houses, but they also do want Harrenhal in the book, so that they cover that separately. They managed to hold on to that plot point. And we still have confusion about whether that was Sabbath of Frey or not. So, I don't know. We'll maybe get more clarity on that later, whether that was really Sabbath of Frey. We want Sabbath of Frey to be in the story. So, hopefully...
If that woman was Sabbath of Frey, I would be perfectly fine with that if she had Sabbath's arc in the story.
Yeah, it's too early to call. We just don't know. We have one scene with her, and of course she would be with her husband in that scene, not with her lover. Her lover wouldn't be present for that scene. It wouldn't make sense. So, if she has one... We haven't had a scene that she should have appeared in. So maybe that'll be coming next season. We'll see. I could see that getting lost in the shuffle, though. I don't know if the phrase will be important enough. But I'm hopeful. Tullys. Yeah, in the book, it's a little different. It also kind of comes into a similar spot. Basically, the Tullys don't do anything in the early part of the war. Lord Grover is old, but not mute, and he wants to fight for the queen. But Elmo, his son, wants to fight for Rhaenyra, and the two kind of clash over it. The old guy in his bed isn't able to, his orders are not listened to, and Elmo keeps them out of the war. So they just aren't a part of it. It's the rest of the Riverlands that takes part. The Tullys are left out of it. It's kind of like the opposite of Aegon's conquest when they're the first ones to join. Here they're like the last ones to join. But Elmo dies on the march to King's Landing, making him an easy cut from the show. Not only because his name is Elmo, but because he's only alive for like a few paragraphs in the book. So rather than confusing the issue, they tighten that up. Also omit Kermit, because of the name Kermit probably, and make Oscar the grandson. Instead, make him the key. And they did such a great job with Oscar. He had that fantastic scene with the Lords and with Daemon. So the book version is Grover grandfather, Elmo son, Kermit and Oscar are sons of Elmo. So they just smashed all that together. Elmo's already dead. Kermit doesn't exist. And Oscar is still the son of the deceased Elmo and now deceased Grover.
Which I think I'm all for all the changes they made in this Tully plotline, because I think it's ridiculous to expect people to accept Kermit Tully and all of that. The only thing I feel that is lost there is that Oscar Tully is really a second son. So in terms of him and Daemon having this like connection in the show, in the book they actually they have a deeper connection, but it wouldn't have been Oscar maneuvering and talking to Daemon in the first place. But anyways, during the scenes with them, I was like, oh, second sons, in a way.
Not a second son. Darn. Yeah. Dang it. So Alice's line about Tully wisdom/rule was, I think that threw a few people. She said that they follow their liege lords, and for centuries, the Tully's wisdom has guided the River Lords. Now, some people took that to mean that the Tullys have been the liege lords of the River Lords for centuries, which obviously is not true. They've only been their liege lord for 130 years at this point. But that's not what she says. She says their wisdom. So maybe that dialogue could have been a little more clear, but technically she didn't say anything that violates the books, because she said their wisdom guided the River Lords. That is supported by the books. After all, when the River Lords turn on Harren the Black, who leads them? It's the Tullys, who had never been kings before. That strongly implies that the Tullys were seen as exemplar, or as having leadership qualities, or as a house that was known for its wisdom. Because why else would they be at the forefront of that effort? Why else would so many others join them and follow them in that effort, and then be willing to follow them under Aegon's decree? It implies that this was not out of nowhere, that there was some setup for this, and the Tullys, the way they conduct themselves, is well supported by Alice's lines there. There may have been some slight borrowing from Lady Jane Eyre for Oscar's lines. Check out this comparison. Quote,
"Your Prince Daemon used his first wife most cruelly, it is true. But notwithstanding your mother's poor taste in consorts, she remains our rightful queen, and mine own blood besides, and Aaron on her mother's side."
That is pretty similar to what Oscar says, isn't it? Right? Like, I don't, damn it. As much a big a problem as I have with the Queen's representative here, as deplorable as I find him, that's the same thing as like, Damon's terrible, but we're still on your side. It's still loyalty, Yeah, this is very similar. I like that. They kind of slid that on over there. So, yeah, Book Daemon doesn't commit crimes in the Riverlands per se, though he is guilty of blood and cheese. But as we said earlier, it just doesn't come up. He's not blamed for that. They gender flipped Lady Mallister to a woman. It was Jorah Mallister in the books. Obviously, that's not a big change. And then there's still Peter Piper and Wallace Mooton. Peter Piper, another funny name that slid through there. Aemond. Let's talk briefly about Aemond. So much of his story, the things that are changing, are just now coming underway. I'd say that he hasn't been changed a whole lot, except for minor things, more fleshing out, like the maybe bigger change to his character are things that we're just getting into at the end of the season. Like the symbols of rule parallel wasn't that different, like the orb, instead of him wearing the crown. Like he wore the crown in the book. Or no, he didn't. He didn't wear the crown. He just didn't take up the title.
He specifically did not wear it.
Yeah. But so the orb thing is kind of a little tie into that. He has the Song of Ice and Fire dagger instead as a different symbol of authority, and he carries Blackfire. It wasn't mentioned, but yeah, he's carrying Blackfire around all after Rook's Rest. He's got it with him at all times. We expected Aemond to take Harrenhal this season, but that's almost certainly a casualty of the shortening of season 2. I bet it would have been in episode 10. Aemond made things all about Daemon, like we said. He's talking about how he's the key that they need to go get and end the war, which is pretty much from the book, Well, we got a quote. Let's hear this.
Septon Eustace tells us that the Kinslayer was determined that this should be his victory. He had no wish to share the glory with his brothers, nor any other man. Nor could he be gainsaid, for until Aegon II rose from his bed to take up his sword again, the regency and rule were Aemond's.
Notice that he doesn't really called the Kinslayer in the show. We were wondering about that last season after he killed Luke, but yeah, it doesn't seem like they call him that. Maybe we'll hear that occasionally. Maybe the more people in the Black faction will start using that title. Maybe they're just slow rolling that a little bit. But this line, nor could he be gainsaid, for until Aegon rose from his bed to take up his sword again, the regency and rule were Aemond's. Yep, that's the whole Aemond is in charge, and no one can gainsay, no one can argue with him, and people are afraid of him. So that we obviously do get that in the show, but maybe a different version of it. His sense of frustration and loss is kind of newish. He's a little more self-confident, or maybe even more psychopathic in the book. He doesn't seem to have this, like, am I good enough? He does have the chip on his shoulder. They made him like a shorter guy and someone that was eager to prove himself, which is a little different than this more complicated version who's got forms of trauma and has odd well, not odd, but unusual relationships with women. You know, he's into older women, which is obviously not typical. Him having a recurring relationship with a single sex worker, that's a little unusual. And so the lashing out, though, that there's not as much of that in the book. The burning of sharp points, not in the book, and it's fitting. Obviously, Aemon's going to burn a whole lot of places, and he does that in the book. He does it all over the Riverland. So what's one more target in another region? It fits for him for sure. Here's something that's easy to miss. Book Aemon does suspect someone helped the Blacks take King's Landing. After he goes to Harrenhal, and they so easily, this is part of why he executes all the Strongs, because he's like, you must be in league with them, blah, blah, blah. It's his own mother in the show, apparently. So that's got some serious potential for drama and conflict there, especially if he finds out that it was his mother. Like, oh my, maybe that will be the thing, one of the things that sets him off into just, I'm going to burn everything. Like, even my own mother turned on me. Yeah. So, but again, some of the stuff is just, it's underway. It's hard to judge. Hard to say where it's going because it's in progress. Yeah, Dreamfire, we covered some of this Helena stuff already, but some of the foreshadowing we missed, which is that Helena's been in front of a lot of windows ever since season 1.
And spikes.
And spikes. Yeah, during the Rook's Rest, or sorry, the
Meleys
riot. The Meleys riot, the fish throwing riot. She's pinned up against those window spikes. And one of them even looked like it had blood on it, which is probably how she's going to die. That is how she dies in the book. She's thrown or jumps from the window or balcony and lands on the spikes. Of course, her telling Aemon everything was very much not in the book. I don't think I love it, though. I don't. Again, I'll reserve judgment. I think it was a little too front and center. You know, I like the stuff being a little more subtle.
I kind of like it for Aemon to know it, but I don't like it for the viewer to know it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to do.
I think it's cool for Aemon to know so clearly what his death will be and to still like end up in that spot. Like that's kind of interesting. But as a viewer and as someone who deals with show-only viewers, I don't at all like hearing so specifically how he will die, especially in an episode where you see Daemon in water in the God's Eye too. You know, like everything points to like what that fight will be. So I don't know, like I'm mostly against it, except for that I find it like really powerful that Aemon would know, and he would still go to the God's Eye. Yeah,
it just shows the kind of man he is. It's really interesting. The whole business with Dreamfire is pretty similar. She doesn't want to fly in the book because of trauma, and in the show she doesn't want to fly because she doesn't want to kill people. So different reasons, but same result. Aegon's return, she says he'll return victorious. He hasn't seen victory yet, and then he's on a wooden throne. The wooden throne could be a wheelchair. It could just be that he's sitting in a cart at the moment of that comment. But either way, it works.
I think there's just a very iconic piece of artwork for the Dance of the Dragons that has Aemon sitting at the base of the throne. He can no longer ascend the Iron Throne, and he's sitting in a wooden chair at the base of the throne while he puts. Anyways, it's just like a very memorable piece of artwork that I've seen in the fandom, and so I think of that. But I'm also brought to what I brought up in our last episode. I love the idea that Helena is also getting a little confused with what she's seeing, and she's seen Bran at some point in the mix, and so she sees more victory for Aegon than she should.
Oh, I like that idea too. Yeah, I'm also less sure about her appearing in Daemon's dream. I don't know, it's a little crossing of the magical streams that kind of goes beyond George's canon that we've seen and how he does magic. But again, I'll wait to see what they do with it. But right now, I'm a little like iffy on that choice. Like having Helena in Daemon's dream, I thought it was kind of cool, but I don't know that it was good. I don't know that it was necessary.
I
again, we'll wait and see what they do with it.
I don't know if it was necessary, and I don't know if it enhanced that vision to
but
me.
Your idea of Daemon and Helena maybe talking or something like that it could get real. That's why I'm reserving judgment, because that could get real interesting.
Yeah, I think if Daemon goes to King's Landing and he never talks to Helena, I'm gonna be way more disappointed in this vision.
Same. Yeah, like she's in his dream and he doesn't go talk to her. Like that would be, come on.
That would be weird.
Please do that. Please don't make that mistake, y'all. Yeah, let's have Daemon and Helena talk. Yeah, even though I have no idea how that conversation would go, it's definitely could be very interesting. Couple more odds and ends. We're wrapping things up here. The Lannister army marching from the west is pretty similar to the book. There's no demand for Aemon to escort them, but it's not an insensible thing because they are worried about Caraxes, and that's a sensible thing to worry about. And the inclusion of Lord Lefford from the Golden Tooth makes sense as well. That was a good little bit of setup because he's the one that takes over the army when Jason is killed by Longleaf the Lion Slayer. I wonder if that character will still exist in the show. So there's not a lot much else to say there. They're just joining the fray, so to speak.
I'm still rooting for Johanna Westerling, but I feel the odds are low, but I want her.
Yep. Red Kraken probably not going to be in the show other than getting mentioned, but that's another one that I'd love to be wrong about that.
I go back and forth because they say his name so much,
Mm-hmm.
which could be fodder for, he's going to be in the show, but it could be fodder for just like, this is a constant thing that they're going to be referencing in the background so that we're cognizant of other things going on in the realm. Like, I don't think it's like slam dunk he's going to be in it, but it makes me hopeful. It does. And again, they set up a lot of Jason, and I think it would be so cool to see the woman that would have married Jason and that would then be like avenging him. And I don't know. I think it would be a good little side quest.
Yeah. Well, also here's a shout out to my own Instagram. Follow me at Azizel Frets. Azizel Frets. AZIZALFRETS. Why? Well, because you should follow my Instagram. No, because I'm going to be dressing as the Red Kraken for DragonCon in a couple of weeks. So you'll want to see how that looks. But we'll probably post pictures to the Facebook group as well, because it should look pretty cool. I'm going to have blood all over me and the shield, and I've got some Greyjoy pins, and it's going to look good. All right. The Hightower army is just marching, and as the reports in the small council say, they're encountering resistance. They really only mention the Beesburys, which is the one that people would understand the most because Lord Beesbury was killed during the coup. But in the book, it's a little more fleshed out. It's the Beesburys and the Tarleys that are harassing the Hightower host, and there's a large host that's bearing down on the Hightower host from farther north in the Reach, led by the Rowans. Now, none of that actually ever comes to pass because the Tessarion emerges, which is like one of the last things said in episode 8 is Ironrod's like, or is it episode 7? Either way, he says that Tessarion has now taken wing and the Hightower army will be unbeatable now. Well, that is basically what happens in the book. Once Tessarion takes wing for the first time in a fight, she totally wins it for them. And Daeron says so afterwards. He's knighted after the battle and says, the victory belongs to Tessarion. And after that, the Rowans are less excited about facing the Hightower army and they kind of back off.
People love that quote of Daeron's, by the way. The victory belongs to Tessarion, because it just speaks to like caring about, like, it's the same thing, like you care about your horse, you care about your dragon. I don't know. I think I'm glad you quoted that right there, because I think it's one of those lines that gave a lot of personality to Daeron and that had people feel fondly towards the two of them.
And it's just kind of true. Like the dragon did, like, yes, without the rider, the dragon isn't going to help in a way that's meaningful. But just point to the thing that is so important. Yes, the rider's important, but the dragon, hugely important as well. So
I hope we get Sam Tarley in the show.
Me
Samantha
too.
Tarley is a book reader fan favorite, and in the show, everyone knows Sam Tarley. So I just feel like show us the Tarley. Like we saw Horn Hill in the show, we saw Dickon Tarley, we saw Randall Tarley, we saw Melissa. Like we've seen so many.
I'm pretty sure there was
Tarleys
at the tournament in the first episode.
Yeah,
too.
there are. You're right. We see the Tarley sigil. So I would hope that they will give us some Tarleys because I love Samantha Tarley. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, let's go. Bring us Samantha Tarley. So the long and short version of the Hightower army is it seems like they've set up things in a way that's very consistent with the books. Maybe a little less nuanced, but that's to be expected. And we'll see if they balance that out with some additional nuance with developing the characters further, which is a weird thing to say about a TV show from a book that's an adaptation from a book. Is yes, the show has consistently greater depth of its characters. Obviously, that is not true for the first show, for Game of Thrones compared to A Song of Ice and Fire. But for Fire and Blood compared to House of the Dragon, it's a unique factor of it. And I don't think we'll get that in Dunk and Egg either. Again, the book characters will probably have superior nuance or greater nuance, greater depth. Superior is probably the wrong word to use there, but it fits for my opinion. And yeah, so as far as that, we'll see. But this is something about House of the Dragon that makes it a little unique and harder to compare to some of the other things. Makes it more forgiving as an adaptation in my mind, because they are required to make up more in the things that we care about the most, about the characters, about fleshing them out, about making them more realistic, about making them more three-dimensional. And of course, that has huge impacts on the plot as well. For example, Jenny P says, I'm like an hour and a half behind. I think if Helena's second son being there was a big change trauma-wise, she would have had to make a choice. Yeah, it would have traumatized her further. I agree with that. That's a big change. But again, I'm glad she's less traumatized because it enables her to be a character, whereas the book version of her, she's just sitting in the corner traumatized, and she can't even be a mother to Maelor anymore in the book because she's so guilty. She's basically is dead already. She's just waiting for her actual death to trigger more events, which makes her kind of two-dimensional. So you're not wrong, Jenny P, but I do prefer this show version of her quite a bit. And you're right. We can disagree or have different, not disagree, but to have different definitions on what a big change is. Because like in a nutshell, taking away like trauma is a huge thing. So a character not having trauma is a big deal. But in terms of the grander plot, she still does a lot of the same actions and a lot of the same things still happen. It doesn't affect the succession all that much. You know what I mean?
I think she kind of did have some element of a choice there to me, in that she had the choice of whether to lie about the whether like which child, like Jaehaerys or Jaehaera, because he couldn't tell if she tried to lie or not, and whether
she had the choice to not lie because she knew it would probably not work, and it risked the girl also.
It's not as straightforward as that, but there was an element of Helena was forced in that moment.
There was a
choice.
It was a different choice. You're right. You're right. That's true. That's a good point. Okay, so next time we've got The Old God's Eye with Joe Magician. That's next week. We'll be talking supernatural stuff, fleshing out Daemon a bit more, but mostly less about Daemon and more just about Alice Rivers and Harrenhal. Daemon's a part of that rather than the focus, which is to say, this is not the episode I'm talking about when I say we're going to cover Daemon in a separate standalone episode. So we've got this Old God's Eye, which will have some of Daemon with a lot of other characters, including Aemond, Alice Rivers especially, a lot of history, a lot of supernatural speculation, a lot of good stuff, some of Joe Magician's specialties. We'll have a lot of fun with that. But yeah, Daemon episode will be a couple weeks after that. The week after The Old God's Eye, we won't have a new episode because that will be DragonCon for us. So we'll have a rerun put up most likely, an older episode, which a lot of y'all won't not have known of yet.
Exciting to say. I will say, if you're going to be at DragonCon, or if you're in the area and considering going to DragonCon, there is the World of Ice and Fire shoot Saturday afternoon. So that's got lots of historical characters, Game of Thrones characters, House of the Dragon, all of that. Aziz is going to be the Red Kraken. I'm going to be Oscar Tully, like in a full Muppet suit. Very excited. I'm going to have my other Muppet Tullys. We have a Kermit and a Grover and an Elmo.
All four of them.
Yeah, all four.
That's right. Represent the Muppets.
Very excited. And we'll definitely share photos and videos of the World of Ice and Fire shoot. There's also some panels we might attend, and we'll report back and stuff like that. We're also going to be seeing John Picasso, the artist. A lot of you, if you just look up John Picasso ASOIF art, you'll recognize his iconic work. He is some of the like most memorable Bran Stark, Sandor Clegane art. Like, he was doing the calendars and board game art before Game of Thrones was even a thing.
Before the TV show, yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of their casting decisions were informed by his artwork, which he's spoken about, and he's the artist guest of honor at DragonCon this year, and so we'll definitely be seeing him, and so yeah, we'll chat about
he's a great
DragonCon.
guy, really friendly. We've hung out with him several times, and yeah, we're looking forward to hanging out with him again, like Ashea said. Also, I want to shout out our Stepzones episode, which I mentioned as a good expansion on things we talked about today, and our Radio Westeros collaboration. We have our book only. I don't even think we mentioned the show in any of those episodes. It's got 6 episodes with one more to come, and that one is planned for next month. So me and Ashea and the Radio Westeros gang are getting that all back together and finishing it up. But we're not quite done. That'll finish the dance and the aftermath a bit, but we'll also be following up on our Red Kraken episode, which we did several years ago with the completion of that, which is more of a Johanna Westerling episode.
Yay!
She's the one that defends the West during all that. And since we suspect it won't be a big part of the show or something that's described through dialogue, we would love to flesh that out fully, because there's a pretty good story there in the book that has a lot to it. And
Can I say-
I want to bring that up.
I commissioned art from Hylora for that episode of Johanna Westerling so long ago. And it's the art for Johanna Westerling on the wiki, which makes me happy. At least she did a really good job of portraying the character. But yeah, we've had art ready to go for years.
Yep, just didn't get around to that one. It just goes to show we always have so much to cover, and we can never do it all. But we enjoy the process. And, this fandom is forever, so we'll get there. The journey, not the destination, right, folks? Thanks to Jill for the last-minute super chat there right before we're wrapping up. Appreciate that, Jill, for the thank you sticker. Thanks as well to everyone who's been with us all season long. We, of course, this is just another milestone on the long journey that we're on here, so we'll continue with what we've been doing for years. More fun, more content, more theories, more analysis, more puns, more guests, more of all that good stuff. For Ashea and for our other folks who are not around today, like Sean and our good friend Michael Klarfeld, whose map you can see behind us, we appreciate your support and his presence in our episodes. If you can go to click klaradox.de, that's KLARADOX, klaradox.de, to get his maps. Well, he'd appreciate that too. And your living room / dining room, bedroom, whatever, would look a lot cooler with some of his maps, let me tell you. From experience, I'm saying that. Until next time, everybody, we will see you for more. And you know what to do. Valar, reread us.